Alright, we're back once again. Another fine edition of Gridiron Graduates hitting you guys up. Bill Rossetti, Ian Morton. Welcome back. Hope you guys had a good week and ready for some more fun talk here. A lot of stuff going on, of course. We're digging into these free agents here. Kicked it off last week with quarterbacks. This week we're going to talk defensive line and outside backers. We're going to get a little edge talk. But my buddy Ian Morton, of course, big on NBA as well. So I think it was fair to kind of start this week on a different note and start talking, because today was, they were recording this Wednesday night, was the trade deadline. So Ian, what's going on, man? And what'd you think? Trade deadline, pretty busy, a lot of big names rumored to move, but they did not. So, quite an interesting day there with the trade deadline.
Yeah, we got a lot of the action early, and that kind of made it fun because it gets kind of hectic and crazy towards the end there. You're going down to the wire, and it can be hard, I think, to acknowledge everything that's going on when that happens. I mean, obviously the Boogie Cousins deal was the shocking one, and deservedly so. And so I'm actually watching that game right now as we record, and it's been kind of fun to see those two interact. I think those two will be pretty fun together once they get the chemistry down. The team's pretty bad around them, but it's going to be a fun couple building blocks there to watch unfold. And other than that, I was just really surprised at I like Lou Williams to the Rockets too. Let me get that one in there too, since Lou Williams has been destroying the Pelicans this first half. But that's going to be a really underrated move, I think. And I was really surprised that the Celtics didn't make a move. They had the assets to do either Paul George or Jimmy Butler potentially. We don't know exactly what they were asking for, but really I think that's a situation where you offer a Godfather offer, and you force it. You make one of those moves happen. I don't know that one of those two guys puts them over the Cavs, but it sure would have made the margin for error very slim. And if the Cavs tripped up at all of a sudden those moves really put them in the thick of things, and they're already going to be in the thick of it. I mean, they're the second seed. It's not like they're a bad team, but they don't have the firepower to shoot the Cavs out of the building. Paul George or Jimmy Butler may have been that guy, but even if the price was too high on them, let's say, the fact that they didn't go get a big man to help their rebounding and shot blocking is really incredible to me. So we'll see. There's already been a couple of buyouts. People are saying that the Cavs are going to get Andrew Bogut and Darren Williams, which would be really two incredible moves for that team. They really would shore up their two biggest weaknesses in a massive way, as long as those dudes can stay healthy, which is certainly not guaranteed. Those guys have been pretty banged up the last couple of years, especially this year. But nevertheless, those are still basically free players that you're getting at 3/4 through the season. So it was a fun trade deadline, though. I mean, starting a couple weeks ago, you got Kyle Korver to the Cavs, and then you had a couple of smaller deals today, as well as the Boogie trade. So I don't think we can ask for too much more than that. I think we were pretty spoiled. Some years come and go where there's really just minor deals, and we had a flurry of the minor deals. But I enjoyed this one, man. I thought this was a fun year for the trade deadline.
Yeah, and like you said, the Boogie Cousins trade was obviously the shocker. After all the talk of the Kings saying, they're not going to trade DeMarcus Cousins and Cousins wants to stay there, and all of a sudden they turn around and make the deal, and all the talk was they got shafted too, and it just goes to show as NFL guys, we like to laugh at the Browns sometimes as being a joke of a franchise, but at this point, when you talk about laughable franchises, I think one team stands alone at the top, and that's the Sacramento Kings. And it's a shame because, this used to be a proud franchise. Even not as long ago as like the early 2000s. This was a top team year in and year out in the Western Conference. And they were actually in the playoff hunt for a little bit, for, say, the first half of the season. Sitting in the 8th spot for a little bit and only being a couple games out. Now they've, for all intents and purposes, have seemed to just throw in the towel. And as a Sixers fan, and for the Sixers fans out there, you have to like it because the Sixers can swap picks with the Kings in this draft, so it's looking likely that that's going to happen. And hopefully the Lakers pick falls outside the top 3, which means the Sixers could potentially have 3 and I think I'm figuring this right, that they could potentially have 3 picks in the top 10 as they, continue the process, even though it's not Sam Hinkie's process. And, one of those minor trades that you talked about, the Sixers trading Nerlens Noel, which is understandable because they just had too many big men. There's no way all these guys were going to fit together. It's a little surprising, too, that they weren't able to trade Jahlil Okafor. But you have to figure down the line they're probably going to move him as well and just leave, the other 2 guys, Ben Simmons and
I forgot.
It's a shame. It's so sad right now.
No, that's okay. I forgot about the Noel deal. People were ripping that deal, but I kind of look at that one like I do the Boogie deal. At first, the Boogie deal seemed awful. But we have to remember, too, this was a guy that was going to get a $200 million extension.
Mm-hmm.
And if the owner loves the player that he got in Buddy Hield, and they still got another first-round pick, that team went from having Boogie Cousins. Here's scenario A. Scenario A is you keep Boogie Cousins, and you probably lose your pick because they had a pick swap that they owed as well. So you lose Boogie. So you keep Boogie Cousins, but you keep that pick, and then you lose that pick, or you trade him. You get a guy that you had highly rated last year in the draft, which, whether fair or not, that is something that's a separate issue. But look at that, and then also they're probably now going to get their top 10 pick back. They won't lose that to the pick swap, to the Sixers, and then they also got a mid first round pick from the Pelicans, and they got a top 30, I think it's the 32nd pick. So they got another high 30s pick in this year's draft. It's supposed to be a deep draft, so it's kind of more understandable. And also considering, looking at the Noel deal, if they weren't going to pay Noel, or they didn't want to pay him big money, maybe they know injury info, or maybe they know he's going to want a max deal and they don't want to pay it, then they really didn't have any leverage for the last half of the season. So it's tough to take basically 2 second-round picks and Justin Anderson, although I think that's a pretty good haul for a guy that you didn't want to bring back on your team. I don't know who was rushing to sign Nerlens Noel to a max restricted free agency offer, considering his injury history, but it's very possible that, someone would have. And so if they're not going to bring him back, there's no reason to keep him around for that.
Nah, absolutely. And like you said, it was likely he was going to leave anyway, so, good on the Sixers to at least get something for him. So let's move on and get back to what I'm sure a lot of you guys come here to listen to, and that's football talk. Like I said, we're going to talk defensive line and outside linebacker free agents, kind of like what we did last week with the quarterbacks. Again, we got some of these rankings pages here from Bleacher Report, so kind of help us along. So, where do you want to start? Should we start 4-3-D end?
Yeah, I think that's the money position, so I think that'll make the most sense to start there.
So we'll start there. Their top free agent among 4-3 defensive ends is Jason Pierre-Paul, who certainly had a great bounce-back season after, the 4th of July incident. So understandable that he's at the top there, and you kind of scroll through Wes Horton, who was with the Panthers last year. They have it 2. Kerry Hyder of the Lions at 3. Ryan Russell at 4, and then rounding out their top 5 is Dwight Freeney, who, you talk about a bit of a resurgence. For his age, uh, especially toward the end of the season and the playoffs. Fantastic run for Dwight Freeney, in what's probably his final run. So, for like I said, for his age, he definitely earned himself a good bit of money, I would think, in what should be a pretty good class of defensive end free agents.
Yeah, it's an interesting group. I mean, you mentioned Freeney. I think Freeney might be the guy who's maybe most likely after JPP to leave. I would think that Horton seems to make a lot of sense to stay in Carolina. Hyder, he's another guy. Ryan Russell. These were guys that these are decent football players. They're good football players. They're rotational type guys. I don't know that any of them is a star. JPP is going to get paid, man. I think he's going to be looking for like a 5-year, $75 million type deal. He's a pretty good player. He wasn't quite as effective since the hand injury, but he's still a guy that creates a lot of pressure on his own, and I still think he can be like a low-end number 1 rusher and especially a number 2 rusher on a good defensive line. I think the Giants, if they can bring him back, they should, because he's a better player than Olivier Vernon. So I just don't know that they can commit that much money to their defensive line, and the answer there is probably not. I don't know that they can. But it's not an incredibly deep group. I think Freeney's an interesting one for contenders. I'm guessing that the Falcons are going to want him back. But I think the Cowboys can be another team that gets into that race. Outside of those two guys, you start looking at like the second tier. I really like Jabal Sheard. I think Sheard is a really good player, and you look at his production throughout his career, there's not many guys in the last 5-6 years that's had as good of production as Sheard, and he's more of a rotation guy. He's not a true starter, but I think for a lot of teams he's going to make sense because he should get mid-tier money. So I'm thinking him around like $6 or $7 million a year, which that's pretty modest compared to a lot of the other competition. That's not too bad. So I think he's a guy that could be an under the radar signing, just as he was for the Patriots. Then the other guy, David Irving. David Irving, just a fantastic breakout season for the Dallas Cowboys. I'm actually a little bit surprised that he's so low on this ranking by Justice Mosqueda. But I believe is he a restricted free agent? No, he's exclusive rights free agent. So he's going to be back there. They're going to tender him with that exclusive rights free agency. So that would make a little bit more sense. But he's a guy that if for some reason they didn't bring him back, he would cash in for sure. But it's not a greatly deep position. There's really not many guys here. I know the Dolphins are going to have to deal with the free agency of Andre Branch. I would not bring him back for the Dolphins unless if they whiff on someone else. I think they should be looking at Jabal Sheard. The Eagles would sort of make sense here in the same vein. They should be shooting for, kind of a higher end Sheard. If Ryan Russell maybe hits free agency or Kerry Hyder, I think one of those guys might make sense because they're young. You want more of those young players. I'm not trying to pay for 28-year-old free agents and older. If they're any older than 28, it's a hard pass for me. So I want to hit 24 to 27 in that range because once they're 3 years into that contract, they're basically towards the end there.
Mm-hmm. No, and then you brought up some good points. I'm just kind of scrolling through the list myself. Not necessarily like on-field related. Just kind of a fun note. I see Ethan Westbrook's on this list. I think the big thing that stood out with me from him, I think he was the one that was battling with Michael Sam for one of the last spots on the Rams roster those couple years ago, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, 100% right.
But you really haven't heard much from him. So yeah, looking at this list, I definitely can see your point as far as on the 4-3 side. not a lot of depth. Um, Mario Addison's also a free agent here, so so the Panthers are going to have a couple decisions to make, but like I said, they'll probably try to re-sign Wes Horton and maybe grab someone, considering the Panthers love to grab defensive linemen in the draft anyway.
Yeah.
Because especially and what's that?
Yeah, I was gonna say they still have Coney Ely.
Mm-hmm.
They've still, and then they took the kid last year at defensive tackle. So I mean they're gonna they could possibly invest again into that, dip into that cream of the crop, which is a great draft class at edge rusher. They could possibly replace these guys there.
And I think we'll kind of use this as a nice segue to 4-3 D tackles, because the Panthers also have a decision to make there. And looking at the rankings here on Bleach Report, their number one defensive tackle is Kawan Short. So, talking about all these defensive linemen the Panthers look at, they've got some moves they have to make if they want to keep some of these guys. And Kawan Short, who was kind of at first the shadow player, so to speak, to Star Lotulelei, because Star was the first round pick, and then they double dipped and took Kawan with their second pick. But I believe they've already used their fifth round option on Star, so they didn't have to. So they bought a little bit of time with him, but now they've got to the point where Short's a free agent.
Yeah.
And I would think he would have to be their top priority. But again, as we mentioned, the Panthers seem to really dip into interior defensive linemen in the draft. So, is there a chance that they let Short go and try to go to the draft again?
Yeah, I mean there's a chance of it, and I think that the difficult decision there is saying, well, he probably has a more difficult skill set that you're going to be looking to replace than Star Lotulelei, because you can really only choose one of those two guys.
Mm-hmm.
And that's nothing against Star. He's a little bit more of a clogger as opposed to a creator. And creators are much more valuable, but that's going to be much more expensive as well. So more difficult to find as well. So, this is not going to be an easy task for them. If they can bring back Short, I think that's got to be their top priority. I agree with you there. The question for them is, how much money can you commit to this free agency group? Because I do think that there's a limit. As much as I love building up that defensive front seven, at some point the resources have to go somewhere else. The resources cannot continue to go just to one position, especially when their offense, it's not like their offense is, especially dangerous or anything like that. They've got some playmakers on offense, but not a terrific amount. So I think they're going to prioritize Short. He's going to get paid. There's teams, if we look at the teams with cap money that could use a guy like that, you're looking at, Tampa Bay. I think Tampa Bay could be interested. Even Atlanta, they don't have a ton of cap space relative to everyone else, but I think they would be a natural fit as far as what they're looking for. Tennessee, absolutely. Washington, absolutely. Could use another penetrating defensive end. Indianapolis, I think Indianapolis would really be an ideal fit for them. And they're, I think, a great fit for a couple of these guys. I think they're a natural fit for not only Short, but I think they're a great fit for Jason Pierre-Paul as well. I could definitely see them landing two of those guys, two of the premier pass rushers, whether it be interior or exterior. And they need bodies. They need guys who can come in and be disruptive players. So whether it be Short or whether it be a guy like Jonathan Hankins, he's another guy too that I think will be very valuable.
Looking at at least the rest of the top five here that they have on these ranks, you have Nick Fairley of the Saints, then the guy you just mentioned, Jonathan Hankins of the Giants, Brandon Williams of the Ravens, and then Corbin Bryant of the Bills. So, and then there's actually they have Dontari Poe at 7, And there's your classic nose tackle. I think any 3-4 team could really use a guy like Poe. You just throw him in here and just let him loose. He's only going to be 27, as Charles McDonald wrote in his report here. So
yeah, I think Poe is going to be a guy that gets paid based off his name. I've already seen people mentioning him and saying, "Oh, like pair him next to so and so." And I'm kind of with Charles here. I think he's a guy that you probably want to stay away from. Big body guys like that generally don't age extremely well. I like Brandon Williams a lot. I think Brandon Williams is probably one of my favorite guys in this class. Now, the hard part here is that I don't know that the Ravens let him get to free agency, but if they do, he's not a tremendous pass rusher. So you got to be careful with how much you pay a guy like this. We saw Damon Harrison go for $46 million last year to the Giants, and I think that that's what he's going to be looking to get paid. And I think that's fair. Too much more than that, maybe above $55 million, maybe above, I'd say $55 million, because you got to remember there's an 8% increase in cap space. So that has to factor into all of this. So anything more than 10% of that, I'm probably not going to take him. But he's a really good player, and I think he'd be a tremendous second guy in a rotation. And if I'm looking at sleepers, I really like Terrell McClain from Dallas. He's a guy no one talks about. He can play multiple positions along the defensive line. I think he's going to be a major steal for teams looking for a run defender.
I'll mention Benny Logan quick too, who they rank at number 10. I'm hoping the Eagles are able to re-sign him, but I can understand him being a bit of a sought-after free agent as well. I think he could be another. He's not a star name in this class, but I think he's someone you could pick up and be very productive in the middle of that defensive line. I know there's talk that Washington might be interested in him. So, but I think if you're the Eagles, I think you got to at least try to keep him, because he has been one of the key cogs in this defense so far. Especially with some of the other guys they're about to get rid of, like Connor Barwin and a couple others.
Yeah, and they've got the cap space to do it. Now they don't have a ton of cap space; they have about $11 million, but that's before cuts. Mm-hmm. And we haven't seen the cuts started coming in yet. But generally speaking, most teams are going to have a ton of cap space. There's no reason why Philadelphia can't open up a good amount of cap space to keep players like that. I think you're right. I'm with you here that you've got to do your best to keep this ingrown talent that you've worked hard to develop over these years. Otherwise, it kind of defeats the purpose of drafting and developing, and you don't want to be too reliant on free agency. So I think Logan's a guy. I wouldn't be surprised if he checks out the market and then the team brings him back.
Real quick, I want to go back to Brandon Williams too, because I read Charles write that Miami could be a potential fit after the release of Earl Mitchell. How would you see Williams fitting in Miami if he signs there?
I think he'd be a perfect fit. Now, I could say that for a lot of teams regarding Williams. I think San Francisco here is actually going to be a team to watch with their big defensive line that they already have. Mm-hmm. They've invested some first-round picks lately with Eric Armstead and DeForest Buckner, but they don't have a guy in the middle. But I think for Miami specifically, he would fit really incredibly well. They've tried to go cheap at that other defensive tackle position, and it just hasn't worked. Guys haven't stayed healthy. Sue's been asked to do a lot on his own, really, for the most part. Jordan Phillips has been super inconsistent. I would personally, what I would do is I would try to get a guy like Williams. I'm not saying you 100% get him. It's hard to afford somebody like that. Maybe Alan Branch is going to be a guy for a better price that gives you a similar bargain. But I'm definitely looking at one of these one technique, zero technique type nose tackles to put next to Sue so Sue doesn't have to get double teamed every play. That's also going to make things easier on your linebacker core, and especially for Miami, who has a terrible linebacker core. That's going to make their jobs easier. So I think that'd be really important for them to do. It'd be really a key move for them. I'm not huge for a lot of these teams spending big money like that, like Miami. I don't think they need to spend a ton of money, but if they are going to spend, that would be a wise investment. I just think they're going to get priced out of it personally. I think Tennessee, Tampa Bay, San Francisco, even Oakland, you could argue Indianapolis should get involved in that. All those teams have a massive need for a player like that. And so I think it just makes too much sense. Even Atlanta could be another team that gets involved. All these teams need help at that position, and so it's a great free agency for these guys to be a part of.
Yeah, a lot of these guys are going to cash in for sure. And other guys that I think are going to really cash in are the 3-4 outside backers. So we'll jump into them a little bit. We'll start by running through the top 5 again on these rankings here. Melvin Ingram, not surprised after his big breakout season. He comes in at number 1, and he's about to get paid by somebody. Probably not going to be the Chargers. The Colts, there's a lot of links right now with Ingram and the Colts, and I think he's the type of player that the Colts desperately need. And we talked about this earlier already. They need people on that defense to just revamp them, because this defense has been not good, to say the least. So a guy like Ingram, I think, can come right in and would just be a really good fit there. Rest of the top 5 they have is Chandler Jones of the Cardinals, although I believe Chandler Jones is probably going to get franchise tagged.
Yeah. Considering the price that they paid for him, I tend to agree. I don't think they're going to let him go. They have $35 million in cap room before they do any cuts. And I'm not expecting any major cuts from them, but I think that you treat him as your major free agent this year, and you focus on retaining him and trying to get him signed to a long-term extension. And you also have to worry about Calais Campbell as well. But those are your 2 guys, and I'm not sure that they're going to upgrade through free agency, or that they really need to. By the way, I'm not sure that they need to. They had a lot of injuries last year, so gotta kind of consider that too when you're forecasting for next year.
And the nice thing for the Cardinals now is they'll get one extra preseason game to kind of build back up, because the news came out today that the Cardinals and Cowboys, if they play the game, are going to meet in the Hall of Fame game, which is not surprising, because you have Kurt Warner going to the Hall of Fame. He, of course, led the Cardinals to a Super Bowl appearance. And then, of course, Jerry Jones, the owner of the Cowboys, is going in. Nick Perry, they rank at number 3. James Harrison at 4. And then DeMarcus Ware at number 5. Interesting that Ware came in at number 5, with his age and the way his play kind of declined a little bit. So overall, what are your thoughts here on the outside linebacker class? Did he get you back, Ian? Might have lost him for a second.
Oh, my apologies. I was actually on mute.
Oh,
sorry about that. No. I think Ingram is the guy that people underrate a little bit from what I see, and people don't really understand exactly how well he's played. He's had some injury issues, yes, and you have to consider that. He's not a terrific finisher as far as sacks. Yes, that's a knock, and it's fair to say. But he's still a fantastic player that gets to the quarterback, forces pressures, helps his teammates out. And he's a guy that we saw what Olivier Vernon got last year. And Vernon, I don't think is quite as good as Melvin Ingram. Now, I think they're both solid players. I don't think that either of them is an ideal number one rusher. I think that they are both a little bit more towards number two rushers. But Ingram's close. Ingram's right on that edge. He's in his prime. There's a ton of cap money out there. He's going to get a huge deal, and deservedly so. Outside of him, I think these guys are kind of interesting. James Harrison's not leaving. Nick Perry, I don't think is too tremendously valuable. I mentioned Chandler Jones. I think he'll be back. So yeah, I think you're right. You look at DeMarcus Ware. That's the next interesting guy on this list, because if you're a contending team, I think you should probably give DeMarcus Ware a call. If you're looking for a 1-year guy who can come in, work with your young rushers, we saw Dwight Freeney have that positive impact. I think DeMarcus Ware can have a positive impact. If he's available, I'd rather take him than give out multi-millions to over several years to some of these other guys. In the fact that if you limit his snap count and maximize his efficiency and his role, I think you can be very successful. The one guy I also think is intriguing is Lorenzo Alexander. Alexander was a breakout candidate. He had a number of sacks last year. He had more sacks last year than guys like Julius Peppers. 12.5 total sacks. I mean, that's really incredible. 10 of those came through in the first half of the season, first 9 games, which that's kind of a concern. You wonder why so many came early. I don't think he's necessarily a talent breakout guy. I think he got a little lucky with some of those sacks, but I don't want to take that away from him either. He's a good player. Why he broke out would be a concern for me if I'm giving them, a multi-year long-term deal. But I'm trying to get him at a mid-level money and seeing, okay, we know he's a great special teamer. We know he's an energy guy. He's a hustle guy. Can he continue that luck here moving forward and continue that emergence? If not, there's worse money that could be spent, because we know his baseline is pretty considerably decent, if not good, especially on special teams. He's not going to be a total loss cause like some of these other guys. Julius Peppers, really old. He's 37 years old now. I think he's going to be back in Green Bay. I'd be kind of surprised if we saw him elsewhere. And really, besides, after them, it drops off the face of the earth. Like, I don't think any of these guys are really even worth signing, as more as just, late free agency, probably after the draft type pickups.
Yeah, you just kind of brought it up with Peppers. I think one of the interesting things I'm taking away from at least this top list is all the free agents the Packers have, and look, they have $43 million in cap space right now, and they have Nick Perry as a free agent, Julius Peppers as a free agent, Dayton Jones as a free agent. Perry, like you said, they'll probably try to re-sign. Peppers, again, definitely getting up there in age, so don't know if they're going to try to re-sign him. Jones, not sure on him, so I kind of wonder where the Packers go. They're usually, when it comes to free agency, they're busy re-signing their own guys, so in that sense they might bring back all these guys, because they're never really that busy of a team. But they definitely do need to work on this defense a little bit, and certainly the playoffs showed that a bit, especially the NFC Championship route by the Falcons. So definitely room for improvement there. But yeah, like you said, looking at some of the other guys, it's you can tell it's a very top-heavy class at outside linebacker. I mean, after guys like Jarvis Jones, you have Trent Cole, who's again another guy that's kind of fallen off with age. So not a very deep class.
Mm-mm.
So
no,
it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, it bodes well for these guys that have played well the last year or two, especially, with all this money available. What'll be the number one storyline for me in all of this is how do teams factor in a deep draft at some of these weaker positions. It's not a great draft for defensive tackles, but it is a great defensive class for edge players. So specifically 4-3 defensive ends and 3-4 outside linebackers, there's a good variety, especially for 4-3 ends. And I think that part is lacking in free agency, whereas 3-4 outside linebackers, it is a generally deep class. So will the market tend to bear that out? I don't think it's quite as strong as usually like other leagues sometimes are. I think the NFL, generally just says, hey, we have this need. We know it's a deep draft, and they consider it, but when it comes down to signing your guy or not, I think they're a little bit more prone to paying the cost that it's going to take. And I don't blame them, because if you can cross out your number one need in free agency with a Melvin Ingram type, you know what? If you're spending top dollar on him, it's tough, but the cap keeps rising, and sometimes you can't count on a rookie, especially if you're a team picking in the middle of the first round or late first round, and you have several other big needs. So I think that's going to be my top thing, is who's going to prioritize that position, even though it's a deep draft. I think a lot of teams will, and I think a lot of teams should, because it's the most valuable position on the defensive side of the ball. So it's okay to have 3 or 4 skilled pass rushers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we'll kind of going off position here. I think you're going to see that a little bit with offensive tackle as well. I think that's a similar situation where the talk is it's not a very deep draft class at tackle, which is going to bode well for some of the top free agents like Andrew Whitworth.
Yeah.
Who is in position to really cash in well, whether it be by Cincinnati or by Denver, who just cut Russell Okung. So I think that's a good point. Do teams factor in what they can get in the draft versus what they can get in free agency? Like, do they want to go after some of these 4-3 defensive ends, or do they want to take a chance and try to get a guy like, say, Derek Rivers in the draft?
Yeah. Yeah, and eventually the risk and the cost of just drafting a guy is probably going to be worth it. Just looking at my draft board, which isn't a predictive draft board or anything like that. I grade players independently. I'm looking right now, and I have 9 guys with a first or second round grade, and another 4 guys with a third round grade. So I have 13 players personally that I think are worth taking on day 1 or day 2. And those are guys I'm expecting to be either first year impact players or projected starters in the next 2 or 3 years. So that's a lot of talent. That's uncommon. And I think teams should probably curb their spending and try to fill those needs. But again, every coaching staff's a little bit different. Not everyone has the patience to maybe wait for that third round player to see if they're going to work out. And, maybe they say, hey, let's go sign a guy like Lorenzo Alexander, and then we'll take someone in the second or third round, and that'll buy us the time to develop him a little bit more. And I think that's a strategy that makes sense too, actually. That's probably my preferred method, so that I'm not forced to take a first round edge. If I get a value in the first round that I like, then I'm going to go ahead and make that move, and then I've got 2 skilled players that can play at the same time. But I just think that you have to be versatile as a team, especially with just guys who make plays. And for the free agency, these guys should benefit from it, absolutely.
I think it's kind of similar to what the Browns are probably looking at, because they've already gone out and re-signed. Once again, I'm drawing a complete blank. I'm sorry. Oh boy, this is fun. I'm on a roll today. Can't remember.
Who are you referring to?
With the Browns.
Oh,
Uh,
who they're picking, or
the guy they just got from the Patriots that they re-signed.
oh, Jamie Collins.
Jamie Collins, thank
Yeah,
you. Yeah. Um, so re-signing Jamie Collins, and then in all likelihood taking Myles Garrett with that first pick. So, so I think that's kind of similar to what you're talking about. Grabbing one of these free agent guys, and then doubling down with um, one of the draft guys. So it'll be interesting to see, as the rest of the draft goes, if any of these teams that have gone after some of these guys uh, pull a similar move.
yeah,
Because like you said, I think with some of these guys, you could probably play, say, two of these guys. You know, your big free agent signing, and then if you're able to draft a guy, all of a sudden you get two good rushers to bolster your defense.
yeah, absolutely. And building that front seven, I think for the Browns is going to be a top priority. They've got to figure out obviously what's happening at QB, but I think they will. I think at that 12 pick is where they'll go with quarterback, either with that 12 pick or they'll use that 12 pick in a manner to go get a quarterback, maybe trading up for there. Or we've heard the Jimmy Garoppolo rumors. I don't think the Patriots are going to get what they want for him. I think teams are just going to offer day 2 picks for him, and I would too. I wouldn't offer them a first round pick for Garoppolo, not based off of 98 career passes. So I do think the Browns will be aggressive, though. I think they'll get their quarterback and an edge rusher, probably Myles Garrett, and then maybe either Deshaun Watson or Deshaun Kaiser with that 12 pick. And then I think the rest of their draft is going to be focused on either trading for veterans or young veterans, I should say, or moving around and packaging their picks to maximize the impact players they can get in that front seven on that defense. And I think that's a smart thing. It's not going to be an overhaul of talent there, but they need to continue to pump talent in there, especially in this deep class.
So just real quick, I'm recording. Sorry. So real quick, before we wrap it up, any final takeaways? What you think's going to happen? Any bold predictions or any sleeper picks that could make an impact? Just any thoughts on this class we were talking about?
I think the teams that go with maybe like the second tier free agents that do similar things, but maybe not quite 100% of the things at the top tier free agents, especially along that defensive line. I mentioned Alan Branch. I think he'll be a good value as a rotational player. If you don't get Brandon Williams, maybe you can pay half the cost and get Branch. So I mean, I like that type of value in free agency. I'm not against the big spending in the right places, but I'm trying to avoid it unless if I just have to spend. You look at the Jaguars and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They were big free agent winners a couple years ago. The Dolphins have been in this realm as well. They've been free agent winners the last couple years, and they've already released a lot of the talent that's come through those doors. Brandon Albert getting traded for Julius Thomas effectively. It's just free agency failures. I mean, Albert wasn't really a failure, but injuries kind of led his time to be finished. And quite frankly, I'm really surprised that the Jaguars would trade for him. Albert was not a good player last year. So for the fact that they're trying to actually acquire him is really bizarre to me. But I understand the effort. These teams have to get better. They have to win. They have to save their jobs. So just be smart about spending, teams. I think it's a decent free agency crop here in the front seven. So if I'm going to spend, this is where I'm going to spend this year.
Good stuff, man. Good stuff. I think that's a good place to wrap it up. I think another solid talk there, free agents.
Yeah, I think so too, man. We'll continue to go through and getting closer to free agency, and we're going to have some draft talk real soon, and continue focusing in on these positional groups.
Yeah, for sure. I think we got a nice little setup here. Definitely going to keep it going next week. So with that, I think we'll head on out here. Thanks as always, guys, for for tuning in and listening and enjoying our banter. So with that, for Ian Wharton, I'm Bill Rossetti. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time right here on GG. Hey guys, what is going on? Welcome back to another fine edition of the Gridiron Graduates. Bill Rossetti hitting you guys back up. As always, my partner Ian Wharton on the other side. What's going on, brother?
Not too much, man. Just we got the combine here, so it's a great time of the year as we can get some hot takes fired off just based off of the measurements and all of the tests that we're going to see. But we also do get a clearer picture of who the best prospects are in the country, and so I'm really excited, man. And I'm sure we're going to keep bringing some great interviews, and we've got a great one here today.
Yeah, the hot takes are going to be flying. By the way, my combine results probably aren't going to be the greatest. I would like to try to run the 40 if I could, but I'd be lucky to break 5.5 at this point. One of these days we'll get that going though. We'll get the GG combine. But yeah, Ian mentioned we got some interviews and we got a good one lined up today. Everybody's this guy on Twitter. He's one of the good guys out there. Coming in, getting ready to spit some hot takes on the Jets and some running backs. Jeff Lloyd joining the program this week. Jeff, welcome to the show, man. What's going on?
Not too much. I mean, like you were mentioning, obviously, we'd like to have our own personal combine. I had my daughter's last basketball practice of the year today. Had to get the girls to work a little bit on some man-to-man defense. May have aggravated a hammy or two. So the 40, I ran my last one at 20. We're not doing it anytime soon. But, look, it's the best time of the year. And part of what the combine is look, so much is thrown out about guys. 4.3 speed, one of the strongest players you ever see. Well, you want to know what? It's put up or shut up time. And we start to see some more of this stuff, which makes this the best time of the year. Actually, last year wasn't able to write much. Was going through a lot of stuff here. My father-in-law was very sick, eventually passed, so I kind of had to take a back seat here and do a lot more daddy duty while my wife was helping him. So back this year, writing some stuff with Turn on the Jets, launching a new podcast again this year on starting Monday. So excited, but look, nothing. If you're the NFL draft, look, Senior Bowl is great. But it is confined to only a certain amount of players. And every year, more and more, the way it is, we always want the thirst for next. Look, Sam Darnold is a hot name right now. Let's relax. We're still a calendar year away. Let's worry about the guys we have now. And now we have the underclassmen. We have the juniors here to put under the spotlight, along with the seniors who put up 4 or 5 years. It's just so much fun here to start sorting through it and able to, the Mike Mayock checking the boxes. It's not so much checking the boxes, it's filling the boxes in here. And that's the best part about this time.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, this is really the unofficial start of the 2017 season. It's really good to get back going again after a couple weeks off. And, like you said, we basically have everybody coming together. We saw a bunch of the seniors down in Mobile, but now you're bringing all the other guys into the mix, especially our quarterbacks. And, a lot of the talk today was about some of the quarterbacks, but especially some running backs, too, really took some of the headlines. And we'll get your thoughts on some of them. And, obviously Ian jump on in this. The running backs had their bench press today. And the big headline was Samaj Perine of Oklahoma bench pressing 30 times at 225 pounds. I can't even remember the last time I bench pressed 225 5 times. And this guy just put it up 30 times. So, and we know when it comes to the combine, a lot of people are going to shoot players up just because of certain aspects of the combine, but is this a legit reason to move Perine up draft boards? Is there first round talk now potentially with him, or is he still more of a day 2 running back? I'll start with you. Go ahead, Jeff.
I think it's a great number, and I think a lot of what this shows you from Perrine is this is a guy who's dedicated to what he's doing. One of the things, and this has almost nothing to do with his game, was last year in the playoffs. He tore up his ankle. He was out of the game. Mixon went in to replace him. Mixon took a serious headshot. He was out of the game. Perrine went back into the game, finished it up. Oklahoma was getting their butts whooped at that point. The game was essentially over. But here was a guy that was not going to leave his team behind. And for me, he eventually went on to get surgery. But for me, that just shows, look, this guy's going to do what I ask. He's going to do what I need. You do 30 reps at 225 as a running back, that shows me I know what you're doing in your free time. You're not laxing. You're not screwing off. Everywhere you're supposed to be, everything you're supposed to be doing as a football player, you're doing. You go to the tape. I mean, this guy put up, there's games of numbers that were just insane. Is he going to hit first rounds? I mean, maybe tomorrow he puts up some astronomical numbers. It's probably not going to happen. But, you want a bigger back, and we're so much into this era of the game now where it's running back by committee. And it's almost like, a mini baseball lineup of three guys. You want your smaller guy, who's quicker, is better receiving. You want your bigger back, and that's where Perrine will fill in. It's a good spot for him. It's a great start for this process for him. And you almost feel bad for him because here's a guy for 3 years, did a lot of great things at Oklahoma, and he's almost kind of not talked about because of obviously the big pink elephant in the room that Joe Mixon is. But a really good start for a weekend for, Sanjay Perrine. Good player. I mean, maybe you're talking, some guys didn't start off so great to the combine process as running backs today. So maybe a good spot for him to maybe solidify himself as, number 4, number 5 overall pick as far as the running back position in this draft. So a nice start for him.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I would totally agree with that because if you look at Perrine's skill set and where he wins with that strength and that balance. And he's not just a traditional power back. He's not really just a plotter. I'm not sure that he's going to be a star at the next level. I think he'll be a good player in the NFL. I'm not sure he's got enough breakaway ability to maybe be more of a starter. You see, like with Garrett Blunt. Blunt's probably one of the few actual, long-term starters here in the league that has won with a similar skill set. On that type of consistent basis. But maybe, I guess, Chris Ivory, too. Chris Ivory could be like a good comparison to that. But he's a really good athlete, and it's good to see him be able to put up that type of number because it just kind of confirms what you saw on film, and that's what this is really about. What did you see on film, and is that going to agree with what you see at the Combine? If it doesn't, then maybe you need to go back and double-check on some of these guys. Same with Donnell Pumphrey. Like, Pumphrey puts up only 5 reps on the bench, but ultimately that's not where he wins. That's not his game, and considering his density, that was probably a reasonable actual performance from him. I mean, the guy's 176 pounds. Like, benching 225 pounds 5 times is pretty impressive to me.
I mean, exactly. I mean, you got to account. I mean, he did 110% of his body weight 5 times. I mean, that's pretty darn good. I mean, I'm not a huge Pumphrey guy, and I probably wouldn't go that route just because, look, I don't want to be a guy who's going to put that guy out there in a position where, oh, my God, this could really end badly. And, look, there's nothing wrong with being one of the greatest college running backs that ever lived, and you're a college Hall of Famer. Sometimes we reach the end of the line. But, I mean, if anybody thought he was going to do more than 5 bench press reps, I mean, I guess maybe you had high expectations, but looking at him, you don't look, I mean, and everybody wants to use Darren Sproles was a small back. Darren Sproles, when he was at Kansas State, was jacked. I mean, from his waist up, I mean, yeah, he was 5'6", but if you were 6'2", you weren't going to the beach and taking your shirt off standing next to Darren Sproles. I mean, he was yoked up. But, I mean, it's just, it's the path he take. Look, someone's going to draft him because he's got fantastic tape. He's got fantastic numbers. But, I mean, does he have much of an NFL career? I mean, maybe not. But, to get all worked up over only 5 reps at 225, I mean, we are talking about a guy who put on 7 pounds from Mobile to get to the 176. So let's not, get too ahead of the game here because of that.
Yeah, it is nice to see the weight go up a little bit because, yeah, pretty much like you said, he only weighted at 169 in Mobile, but still I still thought he looked pretty good in Mobile. I still remember saying I liked all the running backs down in Mobile. I still think this is a really good class. So, there's definitely
that almost doesn't help him. That almost hurts him. Because obviously, people have their, the height, the weight, what you're exactly looking for. A deep class probably doesn't exactly help Pumpkin in this scenario.
We'll give you a chance now. Jeff had hit me up before we recorded and wanted to gush about a certain player, so I'm going to let him go on this little rant right now. He put up a good number at the bench himself too. Dalvin Cook putting up 22 reps, which was tied for fourth among all running backs, and by all accounts, Cook is the number one running back in this class. Very well could be the first back taken. So, have at it, Jeff.
If you guys want to go grab something to eat or a sandwich or something real quick. But look, what's been going on for Dalvin Cook, it just drives me crazy. Look, as far as, obviously we all are college football fans. We wouldn't be doing this otherwise. And, some guys will never reveal the college team that they follow. I do follow a bunch of teams. I do like a bunch of teams. But I've been a Florida State football fan for over 30 years. What I can say is Dalvin Cook is right up there next to Peter Warrick as far as the greatest skill position player to ever come out of that university. And for as long as they've been a solid top 5 national program, that's obviously saying something. But the amount of what's been put on him as far as negativity, it's almost baffling. I mean, it's, the shoulder injuries, yeah. But yet I see things of Reuben Foster from Alabama could be the number 2 overall player in this class. The guy's been wearing a shoulder harness ever since the day he walked in at Tuscaloosa. And now he can't even compete in the combine. We hear about Jonathan Allen. Today, no, he has arthritic shoulders. Obviously, there were shoulder injuries there. Nobody chose to report about it. Why Dalvin Cook's being singled out over other prospects in this class, that's an issue for me. Look, a lot of guys have injury concerns. We know this. But why is one guy constantly mentioned? I don't know where we go with that. But look, what came in today, he went right to his interviews. How did it go with the doctors? My shoulders checked out just fine. And, well, okay, all right, that's interesting. Is he trying to help himself here? Then he goes to the bench press and pounds out 22 reps. If you've had 3 shoulder injuries, 3 shoulder surgeries, and you can pound out 22 reps, obviously those shoulder injuries have not been that bad. Now, here's the other thing. In 3 years as a Florida State Seminole, he's missed 1 game with a cranky hamstring, which he had for about a 7-week period. The only reason he missed the 1 game he did is because it was against Syracuse, and they were going to play at Clemson the following Saturday, his sophomore year. A game where his second or third carry, he went 65 yards for a touchdown. So I just don't understand why it's getting there. Look, some people say, oh, well, the shoulder injuries were code word for off-field. Look, there are some incidents there. Some of it is, look, Dalvin Cook didn't grow up with the greatest upbringing. Some of it maybe who he was influenced, who he spent his time with as a kid. But part of it also was, but one of the big things is when he started entertaining the idea of Florida State, his grandmother, who was basically looking after him almost 100% of the time, said, well, if Florida State's interested, you want to go there, you better get the heck out of Miami and get yourself to Florida State. He did. There was that first little incident after the freshman year, whatever happened outside that club. No charges were filed. Did a girl get pushed? This, that, and the other thing. I'm not going to praise him here by any means. Obviously, he got himself into a position that he shouldn't have been in, and maybe it went too far. Whether or not he actually pushed the girl down, I don't know. But that's what we're harping on now, and it just seems so much is being brought up to try to bring him down. I just can't understand it. His tape for the last few years has been outstanding. Look, Derrick Henry won the Heisman last year, had a phenomenal year. I still think Cook and McCaffrey had better years. I will stand by that. Dalvin Cook this year with over 2,000 yards, and whether any SEC people want to believe it, the ACC was the best conference in college football this year. It just seems so much is being brought to try to bring him down. And now, look, we talk with a lot of guys. Ian, I know, obviously, you talk with a lot of guys. And the guys I've gotten, it seems it's very important to Leonard Fournette's camp that Leonard Fournette gets drafted 1 overall. Are some people in that camp trying to float out things to bring Dalvin down? I do believe it to some extent. I just don't understand why the game is being this deep, this appreciated on his level. He's a better receiver than Leonard Fournette. I do think he's the overall better running back. And the other thing is, you look at what Darius Juice did with LSU this year. That's more of what Dalvin Cook would have looked like if he were an LSU Tiger. Would he put up the same numbers of Fournette, maybe a little bit better? Probably would have. It seems people are trying so hard to bring his game down. It kills me. Look, if it off field and something's really legitimately there, yes, that's a legitimate thing. But it seems like they're just trying to grasp at straws here to bring Dalvin's game down, and for me, it's baffling. It just really is. And even the fumble rate, I will tell you right now, I've seen every snap he's taken. I watch every Florida State game. I watch every Florida State game twice. I never came away with him as the reputation of a fumbler. And it's not that I'm a Florida State homer. I mean, I'll bag on a guy here and there. Nick O'Leary, people love. No, that was never going to happen. Roderick Johnson, he declared this year. Do I think he should have? No, he wasn't ready. I'll call him like I see him. I just think Dalvin Cook, after today, obviously, a really, really good start to regain the momentum I think he deserves. But I just think he's getting nagged on a little bit way too much for my liking.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, the injuries are one thing. That's kind of hard for us to know, but ultimately that comes down to, like you said, that's what they check for. That's exactly what this event is for them to get checked on. And I like Leonard Fournette. I think he's going to be a fine NFL running back if he goes to the right situation. I think he could be an awesome running back. But when you look at Dalvin Cook, I don't think that there's really a comparison in terms of saying one is clearly a better running back. One is maybe a better downhill athlete and a more impressive athlete for his size. But I think Fournette struggles a little bit more with the nuance of the game. And yeah, you get him into the open field, and yeah, he's going to truck some dudes that are, 50 to 70 pounds lighter than him. And that's fine. Like, that's not a knock on him. That's what he should do. But Dalvin Cook's just going to run around you, and I think that that's a positive as well. You look at the injury history of Fournette, and again, it's not to take anything away from him, but we should be able to look at that and say it's not like just because this dude's 240 pounds that he's not getting hurt, because he is getting hurt. I mean, we saw that. We saw him limited this past year due to an ankle injury, which I don't fault him for that. But still, though, where do you think guys are going to tackle him in the NFL? It's not going to be around his shoulder pads. It's going to be in his lower body. So can he withstand those hits? It's fair to have questions, I think, about shoulders. You definitely don't want guys having arthritis, but running back is a position where you're probably going to get a guy for maybe 6 to 7 years anyways. So if you can maximize the production in that time frame, and pretty much any situation that Dalvin Cook goes into, he's going to be a stud. Like, I don't really question that at all. I don't think that that's even something we can have to debate. If you can't see the special talent in him, whether you think he's better than Fournette or not, or whether, it doesn't really matter where you rank him, but you have to admit this is a special talent because we don't see guys like this too often. We had Ezekiel Elliott last year. Next year we've got a whole slew of backs that are just fantastic as well. But that's a little bit of a abnormal thing, and I'm with you, Jeff. I think that it is a little strange how it's been more so negative with Dalvin Cook throughout this process already. And I think that he's going to have a tough task because Fournette's going to test well. He has a good opportunity to get that positive momentum back. I don't know if he'll be picked ahead of Fournette. I think Fournette may get him there. The NFL's just, and rightfully so, but they're obsessed with the measurables of Leonard Fournette. And I understand that. But I think overall when you're looking at the impact of these two guys, if they both go into perfect situations, I still like Dalvin Cook's chances a little bit more to be the more productive player throughout his career.
Well, the one thing, and I will say, look, I am not knocking Leonard Fournette by any means whatsoever, and that's what some people think. For me, it's more of, look, I think Dalvin's getting bashed on so much. I am certainly going to jump on that train. I think they are probably the only two guys who probably should be in first-round consideration. But you watch film on these second-round, third-round, fourth-round guys. These Fournette and Cook, these guys are an open field, and it's almost like Pac-Man. You know, when you eat they just assume, they just consume the open yardage, hoover it up, vacuum it up. If there's a free 20 yards, they're going to get every drop of that 20 yards. You see some of the other guys, I mean, they start angling runs out. These guys hit daylight a million miles an hour, and if there's 18, 19, 20 yards, they're going to get it, and then they'll get the extra 3, 4, 5 by getting it, some contact, spinning in, leaning forward, getting the extra yardage. They're definitely the best two-in show, and it's not. I don't want anyone to ever think I'm discounting Leonard Fournette, but these guys are just, I mean, they are heads and shoulders above what is a really good running back class. But these are the only two that really should legitimately be getting first-round consideration.
Yeah, let me ask you about that. What are your thoughts on Christian McCaffrey? Because he's a guy we've seen get buzz as high as number, I think, 8 to Carolina, and is late first round to like the Raiders. I've seen them connected to him and some other late first-round teams. What are your thoughts on him?
Well, I mean, first off, you see some mention also with the Patriots, and let's just stop with the cliche and the okay white.
But he's white, yeah. He's got to be a fit there.
Oh, right. And it was great. Ryan Switzer was another one. Oh, I get it. Somebody said something about it, and he found the tweet and called the guy right out. But look, I do understand the Raider fit because for the Raiders, who are a great up and coming team. First off, they love Derek Carr, and one thing that I always could never understand with Derek Carr is some people wanted to downgrade the fact that his brother was David. Look, David was put in a terrible position, but Derek was around the NFL game, around an NFL quarterback his whole life. Christian McCaffrey, obviously one of his father's best friends is John Elway. Christian knows the game in and out. You put him in a spot like Raiders, which I think is the only really spot for him in the first round. He can split out. He can punt return. If you need him to take 18 to 20 carries on a given Sunday, he can do it. He probably shouldn't do it week in and week out, but he can do it on the weeks where the matchups dictate that that's a good spot for him. Maybe that's it. He's going to bring you a little bit of everything, and people want to get upset about that. Oh, maybe he's too versatile. No, don't overthink it. I mean, as the years goes on, we get the hybrid players more and more. He can play some slot receiver for you. There's just so much you can do with Christian McCaffrey. I will say the 10 bench reps today, that definitely surprised me. You would figure a guy, a son of a pro, who's been around football his whole life, the number would have been a little bit better. Whether the 202 he currently carried into Indianapolis was to test better agility-wise and speed-wise, I can understand that. With the white theory, maybe he's not that fast. But he's a really, really solid player. I think more of his sweet spot is maybe top 45 as a player. But Christian McCaffrey's not a bad player. The 10 surprised me, though. It did surprise me a little bit. The 30-inch arms, when you're talking with the running back, what's one of your main elusive things to, create separation and get more yards? Obviously, the stiff arm. The 30-inch arms may hinder that. But still a solid player. But, I mean, there's two top dogs here, and then we start to slot these running backs in where they're going to get drafted as maybe where they are better team fits and team needs.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. Like, I'm looking at my own Christian McCaffrey grade, and I agree. I have him as a high second-round pick, and I think that he's a guy that's going to be more of a matchup-based player than a full-time running back, than someone that's going to – it's not that he can't do it. You see him run and create between the tackles, but I agree with you. His size, it's not a net – it's not like a huge negative, but it's also something that you could see creating some issues. Having the shorter arms, having to rely on his quickness over the ability to just shed tackles. He's going to take bigger hits in the NFL, and he's not going to be able to keep defenders outside of his frame quite as well. Those could create some issues, and I think it's fair to say that for every running back that we have to keep durability in mind because this is such a good running back class. If you're going to be risking the availability, and availability I think is really something underrated that I don't think Draft Twitter does a great job of considering when they're looking at prospects. Being on the field is the number one asset that you can have. So keeping that in mind, is McCaffrey going to be able to stay healthy? Obviously, we don't know, but we have to play those odds a little bit. And if I'm a team in the first round, that's something I have to consider, because if I can get Christian McCaffrey at the early second round or late first round, well, is that a better investment than maybe waiting until the third or fourth round and looking at maybe a slightly less dynamic, but maybe a player that has a little bit more of the measurables, maybe like a Joe Williams, like a Kareem Hunt, those type of players? Can I afford to take that little bit of a step back to maybe get a better value and maybe take somebody that has a little bit more of that size that can protect themselves a little bit better? And is it worth it? Now, some team is going to decide that, and they're going to have to make that choice. But I agree. I like McCaffrey a lot, but I am a little bit hesitant with him.
I think one of the most interesting things with McCaffrey is you could maybe go over a 3-week period, and if you just wanted to look at what his NFL box scores were, you could see 1 week of 17 carries for 105. You could go to the next week and see 8 receptions for 70 yards. And they can go to week 3 and say, oh, he had a 74-yard punt return. I think he serves a lot of needs, which will probably, there's no reason that will not help his draft stock. But, maybe you're not looking at him as obviously not a bell cow by any means, but he is certainly going to, find a way to help an offense, which is why I would suggest Oakland maybe as early as 24. Obviously, they still have a couple of needs as well. But, you're getting a player who can fill, obviously, more than one role. So it definitely makes him appealing in that aspect.
Let me ask you this. And you talk about comparable players. Would you rather have Curtis Samuel than Christian McCaffrey?
The thing that gets me excited about Samuel is, look, I know what he can do a little bit, obviously running back wise, is I do like him, I think, more at wide receiver. And part of what it is, and one of the reasons, I liked Michael Thomas last year, and it wasn't that I was down on him. The biggest concern I always had about Michael Thomas is he's going to go from Ohio State to an NFL team, and how is he going to handle the volume in being a full-time receiver in a league, on a team where receiving is the emphasis, and it's a bigger part of the game. Michael Thomas basically told me, Jeff, shut the hell up. I got this, and went out and put up monster numbers. Now, if Curtis Samuel gets himself in the position where he plays more full-time wide receiver, do we see those type of numbers? I mean, could he be a 75, 80 reception type of guy? Also, you look at a guy like Tyreek Hill, obviously much different off-field wise, but everyone looked at Kansas City this year and said, man, I'd love to get my hands on a Tyreek Hill. So that's where he's appealing, and the fact that he can do that, he should be bringing, some legit serious speed to the aspect as well, which we'll find out soon enough. So McCaffrey, if you're going to base basically on what I've seen and what I know can happen, you're probably going to draft McCaffrey. If you're going to draft on upside, you're going to be the guy banging the table for Samuel.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I mean, I think both guys are going to have good combines. I think Samuel will be a huge winner of the combine this weekend. He's only added, I think, about 8 pounds since high school, and coming out of high school, he ran like a 4.35, and his agility drills are going to be awesome. So I think he's going to be a guy that you continue to see more of a positive buzz on him as well. So yeah, I'm with you there, though. It's a little bit different and a little bit tough to compare them. I think their NFL roles might be similar, but their collegiate roles weren't entirely the same. McCaffrey was the bell cow back and really was the whole offense for Stanford, whereas Ohio State kind of had to wait to use a guy like Samuel because of Ezekiel Elliott and all the other weapons that they had, especially in Samuel's sophomore season with Michael Thomas there too. So it'll be interesting to see, and especially with this class, about this running back class, what are some other guys that have caught your eye? There's basically like 30 draftable running backs. So I know that's a really deep class, but I mean, are there some other guys that have your eye looking at day 2, day 3?
One guy who I think it's going to be interesting how he tests, Marlon Mack from USF. I was kind of a little bit late to the party on him. He was a guy that there's a couple of guys I know down at USF. They weren't sure if he was going to declare or not. Obviously, the coaching switch came, and for him, he was kind of like, all right, let's just, time to pull freight. I almost give him like a Houdini label. There's some runs where, you just see, and it's like, all right, well, this is going to turn into a -1 or a 2. And the next thing you know, there's 11 guys, and he's on his way to the end zone. Seems to have some really good long speed. I mean, I don't think he's going to, the 40 we're going to see is ridiculous. But he gets himself out of a lot of trouble and gets himself deep on runs a lot. A guy who, the more I watch, the more I like. It doesn't seem there's so much USF film to get your hands on. I wish I could get some more. But there's a lot of what you see. And obviously you're going to bring in the question of, how much competition did he face, obviously, but has played Florida State a couple times and certainly held his own in there. Kareem Hunt, like we've mentioned, I mean, here's the guy out of the MAC, I mean, who has done it. I mean, you cannot have a better resume from his standpoint from what he's done in his years there. You absolutely have to love him. Corey Clement, South Jersey guy, I've known about Corey Clement for years now. It always seems that Wisconsin running backs, it goes one of two ways. You're either boom or you're bust. Obviously he was a running mate, obviously, with Gordon a few years ago. Last year, the year just kind of went south, had a hernia type of thing and a groin. It affected his whole year, basically put it all, kind of squashed any momentum he had going. Came back this year, played a lot more positive, played a lot more tougher. Guy I definitely like going forward. Matt Days out of North Carolina State, a guy that's always just played tough, a program that hasn't traditionally been good for years, but he always seemed to be the guy that you always kept coming back to. Foreman out of Texas is a guy who's interesting. Obviously, there were a lot of questions about the weight. He came in at 233. Obviously, a lot of these guys seems like they cut some weight here. It was weird that you saw that Fournette came in as the heaviest almost all of these guys. But he's an interesting guy. I mean, any guy can put up almost, the numbers he did, around 2,000 yards. Granted, it's the Big 12, but still, it's a 2,000-yard season. It's going to make you take notice. You really want to see how he times. And one for me that I just can't get on board with is Jamal Williams from BYU. I mean, I like the traits that everybody's seeing, whether it's the vision and the breaking tackles. I just don't see this happening on Sundays. And there's one run everyone keeps wanting to bring up. I must have seen 1 million gifs and vines of it. I think it was against Arizona. He breaks a couple tackles, breaks off on a 45-degree angle to the, to the left, to the sideline. It just looks like a guy running through a dewy meadow. I mean, there's no speed to it. Everybody gets so excited about this run, and he basically covered about 12 yards in like 6 seconds, it almost seems. He's just a guy I cannot get on board with.
Yeah, it's interesting, and that you mentioned Days. Days is a guy who did not make my original cut of guys to evaluate, and as I'm getting closer to finishing up my draft guide, I've got some time here, and I'm going to go back and actually add him and watch him, even though he didn't make the combine, because he's a guy I've been hearing a lot of good things about.
How many guys? How many guys in that draft guide?
I am going to be having about 180, 185.
Okay.
So yeah, it's not overwhelming. It's not a huge number, but basically what I learned from my 2 years ago was that if you get up to about 250, 300 guys, you're really searching for film that just doesn't exist. And you're kind of having to base opinions off of very few looks and really at guys that may not have any chance to even reach the NFL. And I mean, look, I would love to give that to fans. Unfortunately, with my other obligations, I don't have the time as like I used to. But I think 180 is a good number in this class because a lot of these guys are household names, and then I added a couple of sleepers. But Days is a guy that I'm really interested to look at. Williams, I know Williams is a guy, as I've kind of went back to look at him, I still like him, but I think this is going to be a critical weekend for him. He's got to have a good combine, I think, to really maintain his stock. I have him as a second-round pick right now, and that's a little high, possibly, and he's going to have to justify. I agree with you, though. I don't think he's a dynamic runner. I don't think he's like a breakaway guy. He kind of reminds me of last year Jordan Howard. a George Howard type of runner, where I think he'll test a little bit better. I think he's a little bit more fluid and he's a little bit lighter than he was, and I think that'll help him. But he still does have that power and balance and his ability to work between the tackles. There's not a ton of good power backs, I don't think, in this draft. A lot of guys who really excel in like the outside zone, starting to stretch plays off, don't necessarily play huge, even though they have the size. Like Foreman, as you mentioned, Foreman is an enormous back, and so is James Conner. James Conner's a power back. He plays with a lot of power, but Foreman is not a tremendously powerful back despite his size. And I think if you look at Williams, I think Williams might play with a little bit more power than he does. So I'm just interested to see what he can do. Yeah, and like I just want to see what he can do, because if he can go out there, if he gets a mid 4.5 and even has average agility tests, I think that's a really good week for him. Like I think that would maintain where I'm at with him, where I'm saying I think he could be a quality starter in the NFL, but I think he could be a hell of a backup too. Like if he's a 1-2 punch type of guy, you could maybe see that. And I don't know that a second round pick is worth maybe a high end backup. We saw Tevin Coleman be a day 2 pick and kind of get into that mold. I'm really interested to see Williams. I think he's the number one guy that I want to see his combine this week. Yeah.
I just don't see the acceleration. That's the one thing. And for me, when I see running backs, I want to see when you've got the chance to turn it up and turn it on. I just don't see it. I mean, if you're saying 4.5, I'll be honest, I'm thinking over 4.6. We'll see. And for me, watch, he'll blaze right around 4.6, and he'll be in New York playing with Bilal Powell come Sundays. That's what I'll say. That's the way it's going to work.
Yeah, he measured in at 6 foot 212. So the 212 number is pretty good. Like I think he probably cut. I would probably say he probably cut maybe 5 to 8 pounds to get to that number.
He was listed at 215, so obviously he trimmed down, knowing that he was listed at that. So he obviously definitely trimmed down a little bit, knowing that speed is probably the focus here. Yes.
It's kind of funny how you see that, and obviously for anybody who's ever ran, the lighter you are, the faster you're going to be. Almost in most cases, there are some genetics at play there too. So it's not surprising to see these skill player guys coming in a little bit light. But that's just because, again, they want to blaze that faster speed and they want to get that money in that 40-yard dash. On the opposite spectrum of that, we saw Deshaun Watson and the quarterbacks measure in today. I know that your team, the Jets, definitely need a quarterback, or at least a clear plan at quarterback, whether or not they have him on the roster. I know both you and I were extremely skeptical on Hackenberg coming out, and even Bill, the Penn State fan, was skeptical on Hackenberg as well. Were you surprised at how well Watson measured today? I mean, basically the top 4 guys are like the same size except for Kaiser. Kaiser's a little bit bigger, but Kaiser, besides him, you're looking at Patrick Mahomes, even Nathan Peterman, Mitch Trubisky, and Deshaun Watson, all about 6'2" and about 220 to 225 pounds. Did that surprise you? I know it surprised me.
I don't know if it surprised me so much. I mean, if you have to realize, there's a lot of pictures and a lot of video of him standing next to Mike Williams, who we figured was almost a legitimate 6'4", came in a little bit and he wasn't. It's not like he ever seemed like he was that small. And the thing with Deshaun Watson that, if we're going to go into the whole draft thing is, you go back and look at what he did these last 2 years, over 30 games. I just don't understand why we're going to get to the point where he's getting knocked. He had a clear-cut plan the day he showed up at Clemson. Look, I'm going to be here 5 semesters. I'm going to graduate, and I'm going to the NFL. He achieved that. The last 2 years basically played everybody. And to come back and to go against, the big bad dogs of Alabama this year and take them down, and then the talk of, he's not going to Senior Bowl. Well, the other thing is the Senior Bowl, they want to carry themselves like they are. And look, it's a great tradition. It's a great game. He wasn't a senior. Maybe it was never part of his plan to go to the Senior Bowl. Maybe he never thought about it as a kid who was only going to be on campus for the time he was going to be. And then you ask him, he's, they're going to give him a little bit of a hard time. It was 13 days after he just played those 15 games won the national championship. I mean, it was almost like, the Senior Bowl wanted him to do him the favor of coming to the Senior Bowl. If you're not going to fall in love with the 30 games of what Deshaun Watson has done the last 2 years, maybe you're just never going to fall in love and you just don't like him. Then just say it. I mean, that's okay. I mean, I remember him coming in, Jameis Winston's last year at Florida State, him coming in as a true freshman and obviously Jameis didn't play. That was the Sean McGuire game, which, Florida State ended up winning. But just watching Watson, it was, man, this guy can do a lot. He was very impressive then as a true freshman and just went on to an excellent career. Everybody, I mean, we got a little nervous. Mayock may have said that Trubisky was only 6'1". He came in. Look, the quarterbacks now, these kids are groomed at such a young age. I mean, you're talking high school sophomores. They're going to all these camps in the world. We know about them this early. So it was almost like a little surprising that people were shocked that these kids came in at the right sizes. I mean, the only real slight knock was that maybe Mahomes' hands were only 9 1/4, but then you take into account the guy can make any throw you ask of somebody. I love the top 4 of this class. I like Evans from Virginia Tech. I love Brad Kaya when he actually throws the football. If you could put him behind a line of the caliber of the Dallas Cowboys, I think he'd be okay. The guy can throw the football. He really has issues with the pass rush. This is a really good quarterback class. I mean, I like Jared Goff. Obviously didn't get put in the great situation. Carson Wentz didn't make sense to me. I mean, they were trying to trump a guy with limited reps, limited passing attempts from a school like North Dakota State. Yes, it's the predominant program at that level, but still, I mean, he didn't play much. I mean, people, if you want to bring up Trubisky, he only played one season. He only threw like 60 college passes less than Carson Wentz. So if you were okay with Carson Wentz, don't be bashing Mitch Trubisky. It's just, another one of these cycles that goes on with this draft game. And, people just, if you don't like a guy, you're certainly going to find a way to, cut him at every level you can.
Yeah, I'm with you here. People ask me all the time as well, like, what do you do in this quarterback class? And I'm like, I see 4 good quarterbacks. Like, I don't think that you have to tear down one to like the others. I think that there's a flavor of ice cream for every different quarterback. If you want more of a precision type, then I think Mitch Trubisky, it might be your guy. He executes very well within the structure of the offense, and he showed at the end of the season, more than ever, he showed some playmaking ability, the ability to scramble around the pocket, extend plays, keep his eyes downfield. He wasn't doing that early in the season, which you can attribute to lack of experience. So I can understand why teams would like him. You look at Deshaun Watson, like you said, this is a guy, now I understand when he was listed at 205 pounds, yeah, you should be worried about his frame. But now that his playing weight was probably about 215 this past year, and now that he's up to 220 plus, I don't see what any concerns are physically with him. Now you look at him on the field and you say, well, he's a tremendous leader. You see that he is incredibly poised. He's not the most accurate quarterback, I think, on a consistent basis, and I think that there are some things that you want to improve with him as far as his accuracy. I don't think that he is a supernaturally accurate quarterback. I actually think he's probably similar to Jared Goff last year. Maybe I liked Goff a little bit more, and I'm with you. I don't think Goff went to a great situation. And now, granted, Jared Goff was really young. Jared Goff was just turned 21 years old when he was drafted last year. Like, I don't want people to write him off already because, let's face it, he's going to add a lot more weight as his career continues, and he's going to continue improving. But if you want to compare Watson to Goff, I think that that's fair to look at them and say they both won in kind of similar ways, and they both had similar body types until Watson had put on this extra weight here this offseason. So, I think that's definitely a positive. I mean that as a positive for sure. Then you look at Mahomes and Kaiser, and those are more downfield throwers, more of the natural. Kaiser's definitely bigger, but to me, Mahomes has this big presence about him. He looks bigger. The way his build and the way he's cut is just this larger looking quarterback, and he carries his weight very well. And, I think it's going to be really interesting to see where they end up because you could argue that depending on where they go, one of them's going to be better. You can make an argument for each of them that, person X or, person Y is going to be better or not better, based on that sort of information, where they land and that surrounding path. So I'm excited to see where these guys land. I'm with you, though. I don't think that the Senior Bowl, on Washington specifically, I don't think that the Senior Bowl is going to be a defining moment in Watson's career. I think we know what he is. I think his evaluation is pretty clear. It's just how we project him to fit into the NFL.
Well, one other thing with Watson is, here he was, they lost the national championship the year before, and now here it was the second year, and he knew what it meant to a school like Clemson. Hadn't seen a national championship since 1980. We have a second shot. We have a chance at this. And just every week, and, the interceptions were brought up. And look, Jameis Winston went 1 overall and threw a boatload of interceptions his last year in Tallahassee. Yes, he did throw some bad interceptions. There's no denying it. There's no taking it away. There's no way to, tiptoe around it. But as the games got bigger and what was put on the table got bigger, he kept climbing and rising with it. Look, Kaiser's my number one quarterback. I love Deshaun Kaiser. I think he's exactly what you're looking for in an NFL quarterback. Obviously, this year in South Bend went absolute to crap. He was playing great ball, and then all of a sudden his coach decided to toss his ass under a bus and blame him for the fact that the defense couldn't stop anybody, and they were in a whole bunch of shootouts that they were eventually not going to win because their defense couldn't do it. Mahomes may have the highest ceiling out of any of these guys, and if you want to be honest, is it fair to ask anyone to reach the ceiling that Mahomes may have? It may not be. Trubisky, for me, he went into Florida State. That was a Saturday. We had nothing to do. I'm sitting here, and a few years ago, Kevin Johnson, who's one of my biggest draft hits ever as a first-rounder, we were watching Wake Forest play Florida State. My wife, wow, who's that kid, number 9 on Wake Forest? He's pretty good. He should play for Florida State. And turned out Kevin Johnson, that started, and it was the same thing. This quarterback, number 10, he's pretty good. And here's my wife, who is the most casual of football fans there possibly is. And each week, these guys are good. I would not be surprised at all if all 4 of these guys go round 1. It is a dire need of position in this league. And, of course, you bring up my Jets. And now, even still, should the Jets draft a quarterback? Should they bring in a veteran? The Jets, you're asking now, Petty, the offenses will be 3 offenses for him in 4 years from college. For Hackenberg, this is going to be 4 offenses in 5 years. These guys have no leg up on anybody. So do you want to bring in another kid and say, you know what, guys, fight it all out? Let me see who's the best of the 3 of you. It's probably the best route to go.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Kaiser's also my number 1. So if they get the shot at him, I think that's a fascinating storyline. What do you think about, what if they go more of the veteran route for Cutler? Is it more for you like a situation where you want just a definitive plan long term, or are you more interested in let's do what we can this year because Bowles and company are obviously on the hot seat? So what kind of plan do you support here? Because, if they go with the young route and maybe they go with a Petty or they go with Hackenberg, it's realistic that they, could fire Bowles midway through the season. Whereas if they go with a veteran, maybe like a Cutler or a Kaepernick, and I don't know how you feel about those 2 guys, but they're kind of turning into journeymen at this point. I think for a reason. What do you want to see this team do? Because there aren't many options, but they have 2 very different options.
See, well, the thing is, if you're going to go the veteran route, give me the veteran who's going to come here and play the veteran role, understanding I may start week 1. I might not start week 1. I may start for 6 weeks. I might only start for 3 weeks. Give me a Brian Hoyer, Mike Glennon. Look, the stories of the 2 years, $30 million. Let's stop. Mike Glennon hasn't taken a meaningful snap in 2 years. So let's stop with the astronomical money that's being thrown around him. If he's going to go somewhere as a starter, it's only going to be a stopgap. So if you want to go with one of those 2 guys who know the fact that they are backup quarterbacks, that's their resume, and they're only here to make sure everybody else is. I'm okay with that. If you want to bring one of those two in, do I think Hackenberg or Petty are the answer here in New York? I honestly don't. Now, Darrelle Revis got cut over the weekend, as did Nick Mangold. Nick Mangold got cut only because the Jets almost were like, look, you deserve to make a decent amount of money. We want you to take a pay cut. You deserve better than what this situation is right now. If you're rebuilding and you're rebuilding and it's a full-on rebuild mode, there's certain players that don't fit that equation. Darrelle Revis does not fit that equation. Jay Cutler does not fit that equation. Colin Kaepernick, I have no problem with the stance he took last year. Look, we all know the shape this country's in. It's not going to play well here. Woody Johnson been assigned to a sort of a position with Donald Trump. Woody Johnson has a tweet where he called out Colin Kaepernick for what he was doing. Colin Kaepernick's not going to be an issue here in New York. He's not even going to be an option. He won't play for this team. They won't even consider it. So if you want to go that route, that's fine. But if you want to build something, you got to sell this fan base. You got to sell potential free agents on. We finally have our quarterback going further. So I don't care if it's Kaiser. I don't care if it's Watson, Mahomes, Trubisky. I don't care. Let this fan base know that any way you slice it, you've got the quarterback position resolved. That's what keeps your fan base happy. That's where you can make your money. That's where you can bring guys in. It's going to have to be, and I'm not saying at 6. Please, for the love of God, if you can trade at a 6, trade out. This is the draft where you want a Costco or a Sam's Club haul. You want as many picks as possible, especially when you're rebuilding. But I want to go to camp with 90 guys who conceivably can make the roster. That's what I want. You need guys fighting for NFL jobs, guys with some talent who know that they have an opportunity. This is a team where, you know what, if they bring me in, I've got a chance to start. It's an open competition almost everywhere. Let's go.
Also, on top of that, Brandon Marshall was just released, so a little bit of breaking news as we record here. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm not surprised by it. Brandon's main thing with being in New York was the fact that Brandon has a lot of plans for what he wants to do after football, which is great. And look, he didn't do anything wrong. But the problem is there were some 15 was a promising year. We really thought things were going great. We were 2 Buffalo games away from having a home field advantage. Rex Ryan stole that dream, as ironic as it is, and it all fell apart. Fitzpatrick, as good football as he played, 5 interceptions, a completion percentage of almost like 52% in those 2 Buffalo games. It all just sank the battleship. But maybe that was trying to just put it all together to see if something could be done quickly. It's falling apart here. Obviously, Bowles is on some thin ice. McCagnon is probably a little bit safer. He's done the smart route as far as first-round picks. He's gone BPA. There are, a couple of draft picks here who show some promise towards the future. But Brandon, I'm not surprised. I mean, there are a lot of young receivers. I mean, I don't even know if the Jets really even have an open roster spot unless Decker goes too. Decker's going to be a little more interesting because he's injured right now. Whether or not they can cut him, that type of thing. It's a tough one. I mean, Brandon Marshall played 2 great years here, but he's, as talented as he is, Brandon Marshall probably, if he's going to fill out this resume and go on to his off-field career, his Super Bowl ring might be nice. So you definitely threw me for a loop because I hadn't been looking. So, but look, open up the cap space. I mean, look, you got to do what you got to do. And look, you can't say you're rebuilding and then say, oh, well, we got a 33-year-old wide receiver 1. If it's full on rebuild, it's full on rebuild.
Yeah, I think he's going to have. I agree with you. I think he's going to be a guy that contenders look at, and they're going to be interested on a short-term deal. And I think he's still got gas in the tank. From a football sense, it makes sense. You want a guy like him on your roster, especially with a young quarterback, in terms of letting your young quarterback trust him, because he needs someone that's going to feed him contested balls. That's just where he wins. But ultimately, it's tough with that Jets roster, man. And I know you guys have had some tough luck here recently with, Revis falling off a cliff athletically, Buster Screen being injured, Eric Decker being injured, Ryan Fitzpatrick getting that contract, not really establishing a better quarterback option than that. You guys have kind of had it rough, in the last couple of years, and it's unfortunate, man, because I hope that I'm a big Todd Bowles fan, and I hope that he is afforded that time to help build a winner there. But he inherited a roster that was very top heavy at specific positions along that defensive line. And I mean, we haven't even talked about Sheldon Richardson. Is he going to be back next year, or is he gone too?
I think Sheldon Richardson, for every intent and purposes, is, in my opinion, is going to be traded. The target is going to be interesting. The best thing maybe for the Jets in that position this year is the fact that now, comp picks are tradable. I mean, we had 13 or 14 third-round picks, given to as comp picks. So I mean, I look at a team like Seattle. I think they have pick. Yeah, I think it's 93, 94, maybe even 90. Then they also got 102 and 106. I think you're going to try and move Sheldon Richardson here in a hired gun type of thing, like we see a lot with Major League Baseball, where obviously we know the contract's looming, but a team like Seattle, if you can bring in a Sheldon Richardson, he can play some DN, he can play some D tackle. It might be enough to put you back into another Super Bowl, whether you re-sign him or not. Maybe you don't care. You're not going to get a caliber of player of a Sheldon Richardson with the pick like 90s or the 102 or 106. I think that's where you kind of look to move him. The D line isn't the issue on this Jets defense. You're talking about almost rebuilding an entire secondary. Obviously, with Revis gone, Gilchrist and Pryor at safeties. I would figure Gilchrist is the next guy to get cut. Maybe open up the free safety position. Pryor's still on the rookie deal. Pryor, if you keep him as a traditional in-the-box strong safety, he's not bad. When you start, he's a KISS player. Keep it simple, stupid. When you ask him to do more, it doesn't work out for him. Just let him look. This is your area. Here's a guy. If he's got the ball, he doesn't have the ball, light him up. That's where Calvin Pryor makes his money. Keep him. I mean, obviously with this draft class, secondary wise, you can easily bring a free safety in. Move on from there. David Harris is interesting. Whether or not he'll be here one more year, I'm not sure. They're totally set to let Darren Lee roam as the inside linebacker. He's more of the athletic, the chase linebacker, the coverage linebacker. Give him one more year to learn, then maybe pair somebody with him, in 18. But it's there's holes here, But the D line, you can move on from Sheldon, and it's not going to hurt that much.
Yeah, I think I seem to agree. I mean, I think that the writing on the wall is that he's gone there. Before we get out of here, though,
part of it with Sheldon, though, is you're not going to trade Sheldon Richardson right now, because the problem with Sheldon Richardson is when he's got idle time, he gets himself into a little bit of trouble. It's going to be a lot closer to the draft if it's not during the draft when he's moved. Because if you're a team, why are you going to roll the dice on him knowing, hey, for the next 50 days, let's let him be your problem. I'll make my move when I'm ready to strike, and I've only got to worry about him for 30 days as opposed to 120 days.
That's interesting. I didn't even really think of that, but that's a good point. That's a good point. I mean, why would you acquire a guy who could definitely just get in trouble like right after a move? So that's a good point. Before we get out of here, though, I definitely want to just kind of touch on the receivers in this class, kind of switching back to the draft, especially with the Marshall news. What are like your big takeaways? I mean, I think this is a deep group, and I think there's a lot of similar types of receivers in this group, but kind of at the top for teams looking in that first, second round. What are your thoughts on maybe the top 5 or 7 guys?
Well, Corey Davis for me, hands down. Obviously, what he's done, in Western Michigan each year, the momentum built and built and built. Obviously, he came from another tough situation growing up. I love the game. I think he's Anquan Boldenish with better athletic ability. Sadly, we're not going to get the test numbers this weekend. Obviously with the ankle injury. He came in about 209. which is interesting because you definitely looked at him and you figured he was a lot closer to 220. I mean, there's not an area on his body that he's not spent working on in the weight room. Mike Williams, I don't know if he'll ever be a true number one wide receiver. I think, I'm not going to compare him to Des Bryant, but I think he's like Des Bryant in more than he wins in not in all of the route tree, but he uses his physicalness. And as the year went on, I had some concerns early on with Mike Williams this year. And if everybody knows, obviously, Steve Morton, big Titan guy on Twitter, one day he just dropped me a DM, and he's like, Jeff, could you lay off the guy maybe a little bit? It's been 3 games back from a broken neck where he missed an entire year. Let's make sure he can make a catch first where he's not concerned about, his neck breaking again. But the second half, Mike Williams kind of squashed any concerns anybody had about him. John Ross, I love. You want to talk, Fuller, obviously from Notre Dame last year, the type of guy who should just blow up, the deep coverage. He's going to draw all the concerns, should make things for everybody else. If you want to say, look, now he's having shoulder surgery after the combine, yeah, this is a lot of surgeries now for John Ross. But a guy I really, really like. I just think he knows how to get deep. I mean, you saw him against an athletic guy like a Dory Jackson, just spun him into the ground on a route. Very, very interesting guy. Samuel, we touched on earlier. I think this guy is kind of the limit here. If you put him as a full-time wide receiver, I think you're going to get some really, really fun stuff with the athletic ability he has. The speed is going to be greatly respected. It should help him on his underneath routes. I won't put this guy as my number 5 wide receiver, but a guy I'm really banking on him. I really like as a hands receiver. I've watched a lot of USC. Look, you want to talk all the Juju Smith-Schuster you want. That's fine. I just don't see the measurables and everything. He doesn't play up to what he is. He's always a guy that makes me wanting more. Darius Rogers, I mean, I know he's 23. You want to talk about a 4th or 5th round guy, consistent hand catcher, pretty much runs the entire route tree, knows how to get himself open when the quarterback has to break the pocket. Darius Rogers is a guy I love the more and more I see. Like I said, obviously, maybe, if he tests well, he measured in well today. If he tests well on Saturday, maybe late day 2. But Darius Rogers is a guy I'm going to go to the bank for. I've just gone that way since I've watched him earlier in the year. But everything with the hands, you catch the ball with the hands, you're automatically going to open the eyes to me.
That's interesting. I actually haven't watched Darius Rogers, so that might be a guy that I try to watch here before the end of the draft season. So I appreciate that.
Everything is with the hands. I appreciate it because it's the way I was taught. I mean, look, I was never big, I was never fast, but I can't pump a men's basketball. So it was learning to catch with the hands. Everything just goes so much more easy, so much more fluid. And I watch him, and there's some really disgusting balls, and he somehow, boom, corrals it with his hands. For me, he's a solid player. Could, maybe maxes out as a starting 2, or, he's the 3rd guy in if one of your top 1 or 2 receivers excels from the slot. Just an interesting guy, 6'1", 216. Hands were 10 and an eighth today. Just an interesting guy to follow this weekend, but I just always love what I saw from him on his tape.
It's good stuff, man. It's good stuff. So I know that you mentioned your podcast is coming back. I know I'm excited about that. Just one more time, man. You want to plug everything that you've got going on?
On Twitter, at Jeff_LJ_Lloyd. The LJ, I'm little Jeff, the son of my father, Jeff. As the 3rd son, I was the one chosen to be named after him. Not really sure how that works, and the other 2 were jealous, but hey, always appreciative. We're going to be fired up. It'll be the podcast will go through Turn on the Jets, where I've been writing. Obviously, hit a little slump this week with the girls both coming down with the flu. But, the stuff will be up there as far as, this is the best time of the year, guys. I mean, it's where these guys are. It's what they're going to be. It's put up or shut up our time. The rumors are squashed. Oh, he's this fast. He's this strong. He's this athletic. There's no excuses anymore. I mean, this is it. I mean, you do not have a contract. You do not play for an NFL team. But you are now officially an NFL player, and you are under the 24/7 microscope, 365 days a year. There's just no much more fun process in all of sports than the NFL draft season. There's just not.
Well, I know we appreciate it, man. We're really glad that you were able to join us, and thanks again for coming on, man. It was a good time, and anytime you want to come back on, just let us know.
Yeah, I'm gonna be throwing you guys some lines here. So, we're looking to do this, 52 weeks a year. So we're starting Monday, so it's gonna be time to, there's nothing better, guys, than talking ball. You guys know that.
Absolutely, man. Bill, you want to wrap us up here?
Yeah, I think you guys really carried the show really great. Really appreciate it. Again, yeah, thanks so much, Jeff. That was really good stuff, man. Appreciate it.
Oh, guys, no problem at all, man. Thanks so much for the opportunity to come on here and spit a little bit.
Absolutely, and good luck with the podcast, man. Absolutely.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so with that, we'll definitely wrap it up. Another great show in the books. Really good info there from Jeff and Ian. We'll be sure to hit you guys back up over the next few weeks as we lead up to free agency and the draft. Hey, free agency starts next week, so we'll be grinding into that and then really digging into the draft. And got a lot of fun stuff coming up, so hope you guys are excited for the ride as we are. So with that, for Ian Wharton and for Jeff Lloyd, I'm Bill Rossetti. Thanks so much for listening, guys. We really appreciate it. Take care, and we'll see you next time right here on GG. Take care, my friends. It is free agency week here on the Gridiron Graduates. Welcome back, everyone. Bill Rossetti hitting you guys back up on another edition as we are in the middle of the legal tampering period. And for a lot of you guys, by the time you listen to this, free agency will get going. But of course, because of legal tampering, all these deal agreements are coming out, and we're here to break it down for you. We've got a lot of good stuff. We're going to specifically look at cornerbacks too this week. We've gone over a couple of the positions the last few weeks. This week, we're talking corners because my buddy Ian Wharton, his article dropped the other day looking at the top free agent corners, so we're going to let him ramble a little bit on that. So Ian, what's going on, man?
Hey, man. Happy to come on. This is what the fans of most teams that don't make the playoffs, or even that do make the playoffs, but don't necessarily they're not mainstays in the playoffs. This is where they come to find that optimism for the next season. The free agency period is fun. It's a lot of transactions. A lot of great stuff happens, and it's kind of like the NBA in the sense where it's a league that's built off of the transactions because of the positive vibes that come off of moves, and it's a good thing. So I'm good, man. Like, it's a fun time of year. Helped break the Kenny Stills back to Miami news earlier, which that was definitely expected. It's something I talked about back in December. The team felt really good about. But so they were able to convert that, kept him on a very good team-friendly deal. So we're seeing some big money deals, but we've also seen some good values already here in the tampering period.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of good deals, a lot of surprises. We'll get to that in a little bit. We'll start, like we said, Ian's cornerback article dropped, so we'll let him ramble on about that. So first we'll look at who they have as their top corners available. Starting with, as I scroll down there, is Malcolm Butler of the New England Patriots. Though he is a restricted free agent, and I believe the Patriots have already placed a first-round tender on him, so in all likelihood he'll return to the Patriots.
Yeah, he's basically off the market already. Unless if someone wants to give up that type of draft pick, because you're not only giving up a draft pick for him, but you're going to be giving him a huge contract as well. And our number one before he was tagged was actually Tremaine Johnson of the Rams. And it's been kind of rumored that he's been shopped around a little bit as well. But, I'll tell you this, it's the same thing as Malcolm Butler. no one's going to want to give up that type of pick just to pay a person that type of huge contract. So if you're interested in them, it's a pretty fat chance. It's not necessarily impossible, but it's very unlikely that this type of player would be moved because of the draft pick compensation on top of the contract. No one's trying to give a huge contract and give up a pick.
Yeah, it's almost like kind of a half franchise tag, if you will. You know, you only have to give up one first-round pick, but even still, that's a pretty hefty price to pay.
Yeah.
So Butler's essentially off, but the guy that could be on the move is Ian's number 2 guy, and that's AJ Bouye. And there's a lot of talk on him, a lot of interest, a lot of teams rumored to be interested. There's been reports that the entire AFC South is interested. Cleveland's been in the mix, San Francisco, Philadelphia. My only thing with Philadelphia is they don't have the cap space right now to land AJ, so I don't really think. And there was another report from Aaron Wilson saying they're not a serious contender. That's probably the side you lean with right now when it comes to the Eagles. So when it comes to Bouye, what from what you're hearing, what's his market like? Where do you think his best fit is, and where do you think he eventually signs?
Yeah, so he's got a huge market, and understandably, this is. I know someone reported earlier that maybe they didn't report it earlier, but I don't know if it's out there. But some teams figure that he's actually the number 1 free agent on the market. One, in part because of the position. 2, because of team needs. A lot of these teams actually need cornerback help. Also his age. His age is a tremendous advantage in this market because a lot of the guys that you see hit free agency are usually going to be 27 or older. And so if you can find a guy who is under that age, that really bodes well because you want to get a guy for a 4 or 5 year contract. And if they're under 27, usually once you're at about like 29, 30, you're starting to see a decrease in most players. I know you can see a couple of these players out here that are like 34, 35, but that's not common. So if you're seeing a 25, 26-year-old like Bouye, you can get him to a 5-year deal. You're paying him for the next 3 years, the best 3 years of his career. And then after that, it's not guaranteed money. So he's a tremendous scheme fit for pretty much everyone. He's a man corner. He's also got experience in zone, though. That's the nice part of playing in Houston is he played the slot, he played zone. Sometimes he would even line up as like the middle linebacker and just be the coverage guy on a tight end or also on a running back. So he's a very good athlete. Doesn't have the ideal experience for someone that you're going to pay this type of money for, but it is what it is. And you compare him, I think, a couple of years ago to a guy like specifically Byron Maxwell is the guy I would probably compare him to, and I would say he is a lot more of a transcendent player as far as scheme, whereas Maxwell needed a specific situation. But Bouye can pretty much fit into any team in any situation. You're going to maximize him in like a press scheme, especially a man coverage scheme, and he's a little bit grabby, so he's going to have to develop a little bit there, but there's no reason to think that he can't. As far as teams interested, I think a lot of teams are in on him. I know that people mentioned Houston. I don't think Houston's going to retain him. I just don't see how they can allocate that much money to their secondary. I think the Colts, Jaguars, and Titans, and those are the teams we've seen linked. Of those teams, I'm going to probably guess that the Jaguars land him. I think the Jaguars just have so much money to spend, and it just makes so much sense for them to pair Bouye and Ramsey after a couple of their free agent corners have failed. Bouye is a much safer option, especially if he's going to be your number 2 corner over the course of time when Ramsey continues to develop.
And we know the Jaguars have been pretty busy so far, and again we'll get to that in a little bit. Going down your list, you have Stephon Gilmore at number 3. And then just kind of rounding out your top 5, number 4, Ross Cockrell of the Steelers, and number 5, Morris Claiborne of the Dallas Cowboys. So, so not a bad cornerback market. Just kind of go over your general thoughts of this cornerback market and how you see some of this playing out.
Yeah, so some of these are going to be determined by how much cap is going other places. But Gilmore, a guy, I think Chicago is going to be looking at him. Again, another press guy, which is interesting that so many physical man corners are available this year. Even Tremaine Johnson, if he is available, be available. Gilmore's coming off of a little bit of a down season last year. The Bills did not play a scheme advantageous to his talent. They played a lot of off coverage, and it benefited the unit, but it did not benefit his skill set. I think he'll get a lot of interest, but I think Chicago is where he's going to land. Interestingly, Ross Cockrell, the Steelers placed a 4th-round tender on him, and that's really shocking to me. He is a good player, a very good starter. I would say he's an above-average starter, and especially for a guy who really hasn't started much, just in his second season as a starter, he really established himself as a player to be watched here moving forward. But they gave him a 4th-round tender, so if someone gave them an offer, they could match it, or they could decline to match it and get a 4th-round pick for him. So that surprises me. I thought he was going to get either a 2nd or 1st-round tender. It's a little bit more money, and maybe they just plan on, maybe they just plan on matching whatever offer he gets. But to me, that was a very risky offer, or it just means that they are going to rescind it if they sign another corner. I know Drake Kirkpatrick has been linked to the Steelers, and I could see that as well. But he's a guy, if he does get cut loose, I think a lot of teams will be interested in him. Again, you're looking at the AFC South, and you're going to look at the Bears as well. And someone's just going to pick him up just because that's a talent that is not easy to find. But he would probably cash in pretty big as well. I mean, you're probably looking at maybe the $8 to $10 million a year range for him. Morris Claiborne, obviously, he's had a lot of injuries, and so he's a tough cookie to predict. I think he goes back to Dallas, but some of these teams that miss out on these frontier corners, like Arizona, Philadelphia, the AFC South teams, the Jets, these teams could be interested in him because they could get him for a good, cheap deal. So maybe you take a 1-year, $7 million offer for him, and you give that to him and see if he bites. And maybe it pays off long term because you sign him next year, or maybe it doesn't. And it's a 50-50 proposition. Some guys like Brent Grimes, that works out. Some guys like Prince Amukamara does not. So I think that he's an ascending talent, but he's a guy that hasn't stayed on the field. So yeah, but as a 5th corner available, that's a pretty strong corner available.
One guy, of course, that wasn't on here because I guess you posted this article before the cut actually happened. Brandon Flowers released by the Chargers. If you had to redo this article and kind of slot Flowers in somewhere, where does he land on here? What's his value in this cornerback class?
So he's a guy that, again, it comes down to injuries. And when he's healthy, he's a heck of a player, and he would be a major upgrade, especially in the slot for most teams. Most teams are going to view him as a slot. Some teams won't. But basically one of the few teams that won't actually view him as a slot just cut him. And Tampa Bay is another team, and they don't need another corner. So he's a guy, if you can get him into the slot, he would be an upgrade for probably 15 to 20 teams. And that's a huge number. And so he would, I think, be probably 4th or 5th on my list. I would probably be more willing to knock down Claiborne than I would Cockrell because of age. And that's another factor too, is that, you've got, just a couple years with him. So he's on a 1 or 2 year deal. He'd be someone I'd be very interested in if I was the Packers, for example, or the Raiders. I think those two teams should be very interested in him. He'd be a very good fit, and it'd be a major upgrade if he can stay on the field. It's just a matter of the concussions and other issues that have kept him off the field, because he was a very good player with Jason Verrett, and then obviously Casey Hayward. They picked up this last year, but they didn't play too much as a group this past year, and that's what happens sometimes with smaller corners. It happens with any player, but especially smaller corners.
As far as lower down the list, who are some of the kind of value plays that you think could surprise, or guys that can maybe get a cheap contract that in the right situation could fit well and can really surprise fans and kind of improve or things like that?
Well, Alteron Werner is a guy that a couple years ago got a big free agent contract from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and he was cut this offseason. It wasn't a surprise cut. He had kind of fallen in the depth chart. He's not really a dynamic player. He's more of a slot, and they had signed him back when they were playing a lot of the cover 2, which he was a really good fit in, but not a lot of teams play that at this point. So because of that, and with that in mind, he was an expenditure that they could afford to make, especially with their young corners, Vernon Hargraves, and then also with Brent Grimes playing really well. So I think he's a guy that if someone can put him back into the slot, I think he could be a really nice value. Again, you're talking that the quality of slot play across the NFL is very low on average, and so therefore teams looking for a good value there, good bang for the buck, guy can walk in and make an impact there, should be interested in him. I would probably look at, again, you're probably going to look at contenders a little bit more interested than teams that maybe need some time and maybe be more willing to spend that money elsewhere and develop a young slot. And slots generally aren't super expensive, so he might be a tier 2 or maybe even a tier 3 free agent. And it's not really a talent issue, it's just a positional issue. So I think he could definitely have a good bounce back season. You're going to hear a lot about Logan Ryan. I have him as my 9th free agent. I think some others may have him a little bit higher. I think he's a little bit overrated. You look at what Eric Rowe did when he came into the starting lineup for the Patriots, and that's what really allowed Ryan to find success, and in part because of he's a better nickel player than he is just a starting outside corner. He's at his best when he can rotate, he can rush the passer, and I think that he, especially in terms of value, is a guy that's been getting some early talk about being signed, and I'm not too sure. I think it's way too early. I'm not too sure about giving him a deal that would warrant already earning that type of contract. If you're talking day 1, day 2 contracts, you're usually talking quite a bit in guaranteed money. So I'd be a little interested in seeing what the money he gets on that. Other than that, I'd probably look at Deshaun Sheed as another potential value. He was not marked as a restricted free agent. Well, he's a restricted free agent, but he was not given the tag, the offer, a restricted free agent offer by the Seahawks, so he's an unrestricted free agent. He's dealing with an injury we saw in the playoff game, and we don't know how severe it is. That may have played into it. He may miss 2017 for all we know. We really haven't heard the extent of that injury to this point. No one's really followed up on that. And so with that in mind, if he's going to be healthy, I think he's a borderline starter in the NFL, to be honest, and that's going to be an issue as far as depending on what your expectations are for his cost. Most people see the name, they're going to see the team he played on, and they're going to think, oh, like this is a good opportunity to get value. I'm not sure I could say the same. I think he's a guy that I would really worry about giving more than 1 year. He's big, he's a little stiff. Yeah, he's really stiff, really. But he's very limited as far as his scheme. He's a guy you want to play him in zone specifically. You want to have him pressing. He's good at pressing at the line, but he's not a guy who can recover and really make up for those mistakes that are going to happen. His biggest positive is really going to be his run defense. He's a terrific run defender. He's one of the best in the NFL, which you would expect for that size. So I think he's a guy that for the right team, that might be interesting. You probably look at like Chicago, maybe Miami as a possibility. Somewhere where he can go in and be a third cornerback on the roster, or even, maybe even less than that. If you're going to be asking him to do any more than that, I think he's just going to expose himself. He was in the best position possible in Seattle, and again, this is injury related, but it didn't work out there. So I think that's something we have to consider there. If we want to go really far down the list, probably looking at latter part of free agency. I think an interesting option is Brandon Boykin. He was a slot specialist for a couple years. When you would know a little bit, Philadelphia Eagles fell out of favor there as he wanted to play more outside. He wanted to go outside. They never played him outside. They stopped playing him. They traded him to the Steelers. Steelers never really used him, but when they did actually use him, he played well. They traded a pick for him, but then they didn't play him for several weeks. They put him in there and he played well. That's been a theme throughout Brandon Boykin's career, is that he plays well when he gets the opportunity. Then he goes to Carolina, gets cut after like 2 weeks, goes to the Bears right before the season, gets hurt, misses the entire season. So you're probably looking at like a veteran minimum type of contract, very low money deal, but you're getting one of the best slots in the NFL. The question is it's been about a year plus since we've seen him. So it's a low risk, high upside type signing. But I think that would be a guy that I would definitely pursue before training camp, or maybe after. He'll definitely sign after the draft, I'm sure, but it's definitely interesting.
Good stuff, man. That's why I was glad when you had the cornerback page up. We could spit some knowledge here, because you're the man when it comes to the corners. I know that's your spot. But of course, there was other stuff going on. Like we said, the legal tampering period of free agency began on Tuesday, and a lot of news was coming out today. So we'll kind of dig into some of this. The big news, of course, is that Tony Romo will finally be released. We knew it was a matter of when, not if. The report is that tomorrow, when the league year starts, they will release him, and the reports now are that his two ideal landing spots are the Broncos and the Texans. And it always seemed like Denver was going to be the favorite, even before all this talk kind of started. We know that they have a really deep roster outside of cornerback. We know, you look at the Super Bowl season, Peyton Manning obviously didn't play his best, and they still were able to ride it to a Super Bowl, partly because of the defense. Well, I shouldn't say partly, mainly because of the defense. If you are the Broncos and you're able to add a guy like Romo, in my opinion, I think all of a sudden they're back to being Super Bowl contenders, because now you bring in Simeon didn't have a bad season, but he still struggled a little bit, and you still don't know what you're going to have out of Paxton Lynch. And I think the Broncos realize that they still have a little bit of a championship window, but that window is quickly closing. So I think that's one reason, or one of the biggest reasons they're going to go after Romo. You let him sling it to Demaryius Thomas. You have Anderson back there, and you still have that strong defense, even if DeMarcus Ware leaves in free agency. So, but I'm sure Houston's going to make a play for him as well. And boy, where have we seen this before? Denver and Houston going back and forth on a quarterback. Although this time we're talking about a quarterback that's a little bit better.
Yeah, for sure. I think they're definitely going to be interested. I think Houston's going to be very interested. Those are the two landing spots. I don't think there's any other option for Romo right now. But it's going to be a fascinating battle now between, does Romo go to Houston, where it sounds like he kind of prefers to stay in Texas, or does he go to Denver and maybe go to a very similar roster? I think in terms of that it's a high quality roster outside of the offensive line. Everything except for the offensive line, both places, great. Great ability, especially on defense, to force turnovers, limit points, and I think that he's going to have a really good opportunity to join a contender. If I'm him, personally, I'm picking Houston. One, no state taxes. Two, also I think that team is a little bit better on offense. I think it's more ready-made on offense to be better quickly. And that's really a reflection on the offensive line more than anything else. I think that obviously the receivers are going to give up nod to Denver, but I would rather face the AFC South than the AFC West. And especially with that offensive line, I think it just makes more sense. But Denver also, I think Denver has a little bit more money to spend on him too.
Yeah, you brought up a great point. I mean, obviously the AFC South defenses are a little bit weaker than the AFC West defenses, so certainly that would give Houston the advantage there. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. I don't expect it to happen for a while. I saw, Ian Rappaport made an interesting note on one of his snaps saying that Romo might do something similar to what Peyton Manning did when he was a free agent and kind of do like a little bit of a free agency tour before finally making a decision. We actually had a trade reported today that'll become official tomorrow. Dwayne Allen, the former tight end for the Colts, gets shipped to New England, I believe for a 4th-round pick. Indy's actually also going to send a 6th-rounder to the Patriots. The Colts are going to get a 4th-rounder in return. This after the Colts reportedly signed Jack Doyle to a 3-year contract after it was originally thought that they were going to let him test the market and maybe Doyle was going to walk. But, you saw some flashes out of Doyle last season. You saw a little bit of a connection between him and Luck. Allen was, battling injuries, but I think in New England, he's going to be a nice fit there as the number 2 guy. You figure he's likely going to be the replacement now for Bennett. New England was never going to match Bennett's asking price anyway. I think he's going to get more money elsewhere. There's talks that the Giants are interested, the Jaguars are interested. So, and they certainly have money to spend, especially the Jaguars, like you mentioned earlier. So, so it makes sense in that aspect for the Patriots to make this move. They could let Allen be the number 2 guy, stay in and block. And if say Gronk happens to go down again, Allen can step in and be that every down tight end, and certainly going to be cheaper. And so I think it's obviously a surprising move, but it's not a bad move as far as the on-field product for the Patriots.
Yeah, and part of this thing too, part of this deal is maximizing the window that you have with Tom Brady. I don't love this deal in terms of giving up a 4th-round pick in the deepest tight end class I think we've ever seen. But the reality is that tight ends take a while. Now, there may be 1 or 2 or maybe 3 that have a good impact next year, but for the most part, it takes them a couple years to get into it and to get into a rhythm and physically be ready for that jump from college to the pros. And so, if I'm New England, I understand this. This is why they've been linked to Brandon Cooks as well, because even for a 1st-round pick, he's going to do more for them, and for a 4th-round pick, Fleener's going to do more for them than Allen will do more for them than anyone else could in the 4th round, most likely. So I understand this move. I don't think it's a bad move. If this was any other team that didn't have a win-now mentality, I would probably be a little bit more critical of it. I mean, I wouldn't call it a bad trade because of the 6th-round pick going back to them. So it's, you're basically getting a cost-controlled player for the next couple of years. So it's not a terrible deal anyways. But I will say that I don't think it's a home run move, but it's definitely an understandable move. So I like this deal a lot more for the Colts, actually. If I'm looking at this, if I'm the Colts, I'm saying, hey, we're getting rid of someone from a previous regime that may or may not have had the best attitude. I'm not accusing anyone there, but I'm just saying that could have been a factor here. And they're going to get their guys into the building, and that's going to possibly help them rebuild this situation around Andrew Luck. Quite frankly, they didn't need another tight end with Doyle re-signing, at least not bad enough to continue paying Allen that type of money. They're going to use that asset now towards, I hope, the defense or offensive line. And Chris Ballard, I think, is going to be a really good GM. And so I'm excited to see what he can do with this pick. But I like this trade for both teams, considering their situation.
And, I just have to note, you're right about how deep this tight end class is. We all saw at the Senior Bowl, really all the tight ends that were there were just fantastic. The top, of course, being O.J. Howard, just dominating, but Evan Ingram being down there, and, all the others that were down there. So, there's a lot of talent to be had at the tight end position in this draft. What are some of your Dolphins making some news? Keeping Kenny Stills, 4 years, $32 million. There was talk that the Eagles were potentially interested, and maybe Stills was going to move on, but the Dolphins end up keeping him at $8 million a year. What do you think about that?
Yeah. The number for the Dolphins is a little bit surprising. We had heard before, really right after the combine, that the Stills price could be anywhere between 10 and 12 million. That's what Miami's worst case scenario was, is that they were going to have to deal with someone that offers the Mike Wallace contract. So I know that was Kenny Stills' hope, is that someone would plop down a 5-year, $60 million deal. I thought it was possible. I really did. I thought it was possible that the market could do that. Surprisingly, the receiver market kind of flatlined, and it stayed a little bit more towards what it has been the last couple of years, despite the raises in the cap. And so that's a little bit of an upset. But Miami was able to get Stills at their price, which is a great price. I can tell you now, at least one team had a $10 million a year offer. I'm not sure of that team, but there were 4 teams in on Stills. I know Philadelphia was in on one until the 49ers signed Marquise Goodwin. They were in on him. I think Chicago was the other. I can tell you that at least 2 of those teams had offered $10 million a year in that range, at least $9.5 to $10 million a year, but it never got up higher to push Stills to leaving Miami. And part of that was because of his relationship with Adam Gase and Ryan Tannehill and his fit within the team. Part of it is, too, as well, of course, no state taxes. That makes a big difference. And cost of living. It's not like it's much cheaper in those other places. So this was a great move for Miami. It was a great move, I think, for Kenny Stills. The team was confident since midway through the year that they would re-sign him. They knew what the price would be. I was expecting $10 million a year, but Miami did a great job to get him at a bargain. So congrats to them, and congrats to Kenny Stills, who's only 24. He's going to be 28 years old when he hits free agency again. So he's got some time to make more money.
We'll talk a couple safeties now. One we heard earlier of their signing, and one actually just broke here on Twitter from Adam Schefter. We'll start with that one first, because that seems like a pretty interesting trade and makes for a very interesting safety duo, and that's Tony Jefferson, the now former safety of the Cardinals, signing with the Baltimore Ravens. So Now you pair Jefferson with Eric Weddle. You got yourself a pretty good secondary there now in Baltimore.
That's what we call Madden-esque. And that's what we call not fair to anyone else that they have to play. That is an incredible safety tandem, and congrats to Tony and to the Ravens for landing that big fish. There was a lot of interest in Tony. I thought the Browns would get him. They offered him the most money, it sounds like, and so that's a major steal for the Ravens. One thing I'll say for Browns fans is that hurts. It hurts to see team players pick other teams, especially a rival, over you, especially when you've got so much cap and they're trying to spend it. but let me say this too. Look at the Jaguars 2 years ago. What happens when players just take the money and they don't necessarily want to buy into the culture? They don't necessarily want to buy into the rebuild. Bad things happen. And they don't buy in, and they don't help the coaching staff, and they don't make a change. That's how free agent busts happen. And I'm not putting anything on Tony Jefferson's character, but to me, to turn down more money from a place, from the Browns, to go to the Ravens, I think those teams are pretty even as far as where they're at in their development. Now, obviously, the Ravens have a decent quarterback, but I think if the Browns had the same level of quarterback, they'd be a much better team. So don't get too upset over this one. You're going to get a lesser player, probably in Jonathan Cyprien. That's the expectation, is that they'll sign the Jaguars free agent safety. If they do end up making that deal, he's not as good as Jefferson is, but you got to get players that want to be there. Like, I can't underestimate how much that actually matters. And we can evaluate the on-field talent as much as we can. And this is something I mentioned in my draft guide. I don't evaluate character. I don't evaluate heart, things like that. We saw Marcus Martin get cut today by the San Francisco 49ers. And I had tweeted something out about he was a huge bust for me. And I got a couple responses, including one person that had messaged me and said, there's no way you could have known that this dude just didn't like football. Like, there's no way for me pre-draft to have known that he literally played football because it was a way to for his family to just make ends meet, which I don't hold that against him. But if I would have known that, and if you know that going in, then you're not even drafting that player. Like, now there are players in the league that don't necessarily love playing football, but you obviously are going to change your opinion of that player if that's the case. So, I look at this deal and I'm saying for Cleveland, what could have been worse is that you give him that huge contract and he ends up not being as great as he can be. It could have been worse. You're going to find a player that wants to be there and that's going to give it 100% and isn't going to cost you as much money. So it will be fine. It will be fine, Cleveland fans.
And interesting you mentioned about the Jaguars spending spree, because looky here, they're at it again. They were the other safety that we were talking about earlier, as they signed Barry Church from the Cowboys, and they also signed Calais Campbell. So
wow,
Cardinal. Yeah, there you go. So, news to you, I guess, huh, Ian? Yeah, I just saw it scroll on Twitter. Calais Campbell going to sign with the Jaguars. So they get Campbell and they get Church. So, once again, a little bit of a spending spree for the Jaguars after last year, landing the big money free agent in Malik Jackson. So, they're really trying to beef up that defense. They're doing everything they can. But these are certainly, solid additions. You mentioned Jacksonville potentially could land Bouye. So if that happens and you're looking at Bouye, Ramsey, and Barry Church in that secondary, you'll have Malik Jackson and Calais Campbell on the front line. They have those draft picks that they like. So you just got to hope that it eventually comes together. It's all it is at this point, is just hope. It feels like there's a lot of talent on this team. It just never came together. Can Doug Marrone bring it together? We'll see. Maybe he can do what Gus Bradley unfortunately could not. But they're obviously busy. They're doing whatever they can to get back into contention here in the AFC South.
Yeah, I like this. I like the Campbell signing. I think that's a good solid signing, and I think if they can get Bouye, this is going to be a much better offseason than 2 years ago when all those guys that they ended up acquiring basically are out of their locker room already. Campbell's a good guy. He's a good bedroom locker room presence, and he's also a good contributor on the field. You can do a lot of stuff with him too. So, interesting signing for them as far as I know that they were linked to him earlier in free agency. I wouldn't have guessed that if I hadn't heard that, So, that's a good. I think that's a great pickup actually for the Jaguars. Him and Malik Jackson are going to be a really fun pairing.
See a couple other picks of note. Brandon Marshall signed with the Giants. Paul Warlow.
I like that one a lot.
Yeah, that's nice. The Roto-World blurb puts it pretty perfectly. It takes pressure off of Odell Beckham. Gives him a nice trio of Beckham, Marshall, and Sterling
Shepard. Yep.
So.
And they may take a first round tight end too. Don't be surprised if they take a first round tight end.
That would not be a bad move.
Like a David Njoku or a Evan Ingram. Don't rule that out either. Yeah.
That would be nice for sure. I think if they do that, then all of a sudden you could be looking at one of the best offenses, especially in that division. With Philly kind of still building and Washington looking like a complete mess right now. They've already lost Pierre Garçon. He signs with San Francisco. You don't know what's going to happen with Deshaun Jackson. Tampa looked like they were the favorite there. So see what happens there. And then, of course, the whole drama with Kirk Cousins. So, Giants definitely doing well for themselves.
Yeah. And they have to. I mean, they really needed to. They need to fix that offensive line, too. So we'll see if they can get anything done with that offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't go, they should probably go line over tight end in the first round, but, it just depends. It depends on how the rest of the free agency goes. It's really difficult to make that projection right now, but the fact is that you see them trying to improve that offense for Eli Manning. And, I wouldn't rule them out for eventually drafting Manning's replacement either in this draft, depending on, again, if they can pick up a little bit more help, especially along that offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
It would not be surprising to me if they picked up a guy early in the draft for that offensive line to bolster it. They desperately need it.
San Francisco certainly was very busy today, at least as far as reported deals go. We just mentioned Garçon. They signed a quarterback, Brian Hoyer.
They needed one.
They needed absolutely.
Somebody.
They needed one. They came in with a whopping 0 quarterbacks signed on their roster, so at least they have one.
Did they have Jeff Driscoll on the roster before today?
What I was surprised. When they said there was no quarterbacks, I'm like, wait, isn't Driscoll there? And then I looked it up. He's actually in Cincinnati.
Oh, okay, so they cut him then. Okay, I didn't realize that. Or he was probably on practice squad. Yep. Okay.
Yep.
So that's interesting. So I mean, look, you could have a worse backup. You could honestly have a worse starter. Like he is not a good starter. Let me put it this way.
Mm-hmm.
He's a bottom 5 starter, but you might as well pay nothing for a bad starter than pay a whole lot of money for a bad starter.
Right.
This makes sense. I know that they're holding out hope that they can still get Kirk Cousins, whether it be this year or next year. And that's fine. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. They're not in a rush. They're not in a rush to become playoff eligible this year. They can afford to do that. If they really want Kirk Cousins, they can afford to do that. Or if they want to draft somebody, see how the draft rolls. Maybe Deshaun Kaiser falls to them in the second round. Who knows? Then at that point, then you're just taking the best value. So I like this move. I like Hoyer. I'm not a fan of him as a starter. I'm not going to lie. I've been critical of him. But here, the expectations are different. And it's going to help them. If he can stay healthy, he's an upgrade for them. Kaepernick played pretty decently last year, but Kaepernick would not work in Kyle Shanahan's offense just because of the short accuracy. That's really the biggest reason. It's not anything mentally, I don't think. It's just a matter of repeated mechanics. and Kaepernick literally will miss some of the easiest throws you'll ever see. He'll make some great throws too, and Hoyer doesn't necessarily make those great throws. But Shanahan's not going to ask him to make a lot of great throws. He's going to make him to ask very basic throws, and I think that that'll work nicely.
And a couple others that the Niners signed. Marquise Goodwin, the former receiver of the Bills, and they signed one of the better fullbacks in the market in Kyle Juszczyk. Today must have been National Fullback Day because all the fullback signings that happened today, or at least the reported signings, Kyle Juszczyk in San Francisco, Buffalo signing 2. You don't see that too often, but the Bills signing 2 fullbacks, signing Patrick DeMarco from the Falcons and Mike Tolbert from the Panthers. And the Bills, of course, also, and that was another big quarterback news, restructuring the contract of Tyrod Taylor, so he's not going anywhere. So a bunch of these teams quite busy today.
Yeah, and the Tyrod news was not guaranteed. That was a 50-50 call.
Yep.
Up until they announced it. It was even talked about that they were just going to wait and maybe trade him. So it was a nice move there, though. I agree with that move. Keep Tyrod. You didn't have a better option. Maybe draft somebody this year or next year if you're really not sold on him. I think that's fine. The signing of Tolbert, they announced that as a running back, which was strange to hear. Maybe if you lose some weight, he'll be a running back. I like Mark Tolbert, but he's a big boy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think San Francisco, though, just adding talent to their roster, very smart. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
Getting a versatile piece for Shanahan. He's going to have so much fun with Goodwin and with Juszczyk. Like, these guys they make so much sense for that offense, and they're going to make it so much easier if they can get a rookie quarterback or again Cousins next year. They're making that job so much easier. They're also in on the Alshon sweepstakes. I don't think that they're a favorite to get him. It's just a possibility, but it's especially if they can get a guy like Alshon, whether they do this year or whether they get a big free agent receiver next year. Again, you're making that an ideal situation for a quarterback to come in and succeed. I love it. I love what John Lynch is doing. I don't think it's necessarily home runs that they're hitting, but they're setting them up. They're setting people up for success, and I really like that so far. So I'm rooting for this team to work out. I like John Lynch. I like Kyle Shanahan a lot. So hopefully they can find success in the strategy. But so far, I'm a fan.
It was interesting, though. Joe Banner, the former NFL executive, tweeting, 49ers spending big money on 30-year-old wide receiver when they won't be winning big for at least 3 years. Makes no sense to me. I mean, yeah, they're obviously not going to be winning a while, but, you want some talent on the roster, and they have the money to spend. You got to at least get some weapons, and Garcon certainly fits the bill, so...
That's the thing. Yeah, you can't just not spend anything. Even if they're just going to structure these deals to where they can get out of them in 2 years anyway.
That's how they did with the Garcon. Yep, it looks like they say he's going to make $16 million in his first year, so it's extremely front-loaded.
Yeah, so who cares? You're trying to be competitive, and you're trying to still build a roster. It makes no sense to me that you wouldn't try to make these upgrades. Like, these aren't upgrades that are going to hurt you in the scope of trying to build through the draft. It's not like you're going to go – they're probably not going to go 8-8 next year. They'll probably go 4 or 5 wins. And you know what? That's okay. It's a way of kind of tanking without being just an absolute horrible product. And it allows you to build up your team through the draft over the course of several seasons while actually realistically having a path to improve, so that when you are ready and you do acquire some stars to build around, you actually have a decent talent base to do it with. So I like what they've done. Again, are they hitting home runs? Not necessarily, but they don't have to. So I like the strategy. I'm definitely feeling what they've done today with their assets.
Mm-hmm. We'll certainly talk more free agency next week when a lot more of these deals are likely set in stone. But I also want to touch a little bit on the NFL Combine before we head out of here. Particularly, of course, the new record set in the 40-yard dash by John Ross, the receiver from Washington. 4.22. Whew.
Yeah. Crazy. Literally never done before. And the scariest part is that he pulled up in the last 5 to 8 yards of that 40 a little bit limp.
Wow.
So, like, you could see when he was running that, like, he kind of pulled up a little bit at the end.
Yeah.
I don't know if he actually got that 4.22, but I'll say this, that was still an incredible time.
Oh, absolutely.
And, you know, whether he really had the 4.22 or not, man, just hats off. Hats off to him. I just hope he can stay healthy, man. Again, he got hurt running his 40. And that's so encapsulating of his career at Washington that it's not even funny. So, hopefully he stays healthy. If he does, he's a first-round talent. I don't know if he'll go first round because of the numerous surgeries that he's had, shoulder surgery, ACL tear. He's been in and out of the doctor's room a lot. And, it's not to be trusted, but and some guys genetically just can't handle it. I hope he can stay healthy because he's a super talented player, but that was really cool to see. That was a really cool moment. Twitter was really excited, and just as like a fan, I think almost everyone that I know I've talked to, like just casual, even at work, everyone was like, holy crap, did you see that? Like that's just one of those cool moments. It's like, that's why we watch this stuff, is for those cool moments.
Just in general, anything else from the Combine that kind of caught your eye? You know, any surprises or disappointments?
Yeah, I think the big surprise as far as a positive, I have 2 big winners. One is Zay Jones, ECU wide receiver, all-time leader in receptions for NCAA. Big dude, 6'2", 205, measured really well, tested extremely well, tested way more athletic than what I saw on tape. And it's one of those things where, especially for my draft guide, I weigh tape probably about 90, 95% for most positions. Edge defenders is the only one that I put a heavy emphasis on. I probably weigh that about 85-15, just because the historical significance is there. Mm-hmm. Other positions, I don't really. It's about 90, like I said, 90 to 95%. Offensive line is about 98% tape. I don't, there's not much there, combine-wise that matters. Cornerbacks and safeties, I just want to make sure that what I'm seeing kind of matches up. And if it does, it's 99% tape. Running backs, mostly tape. Wide receivers, I think in general is probably about that 90-10. You don't want a bunch of average size players that have average measurables. Those guys get lost into the fold. And that's what I was worried about with Zay Jones, is to me on tape, this is obviously you saw the size. I didn't always see the burst. I didn't always see the deep speed. And part of that was the offense. And so I saw the athleticism. I said, okay, let me go back to the film. Let me see if I missed something. To be honest, I went back. I watched 2 new games that I hadn't watched before. I still didn't see it. So for me, it's not going to really change his grade, but it's still a winner because maybe he can unlock that. Maybe with the right coaching. Maybe it was just a matter of the offense. Maybe it was a matter of he not maximizing that athleticism with his technique. And so I boosted his grade very slightly. Very slightly. Still a 3rd-round pick in my eyes, but it's still a winner, though, because I saw something that most of the rest of the receivers in this class aren't capable of doing. I'd rather get a guy who's capable of doing it than a guy who's not. For example, Isaiah Ford, who ran like a 4.64. He's skinny and tall. I do like his tape. I have him in the middle round mix, but he tested pretty poorly. So I would rather take the risk on a guy with the athletic upside because the tape is similar. Mm-hmm. Another winner would be T.J. Watt from Wisconsin. Gonna be honest, I did not like his tape. I had a 4th round grade on him. Guy that means to me, developmental player, rotational player with developmental traits that may take several years and has some possible fatal flaws that could keep him from developing. He did not play that athletic. And I'm going to do a full reevaluation on him where I literally will just delete what I have in my scouting report and just take a completely fresh look at him. And that's just to give him a fair chance. Maybe I just wasn't seeing the right things. Maybe I didn't look at the right games. But I'm going to do that for him. When I did glance back at him and re-looked through my scouting report, I didn't see a great athlete. I saw a guy who flashed some good athleticism, but again, it was his first year at a position, so maybe it was just a matter of he was playing slow, he was playing tentative, he was playing not confident. Those are possibilities. But he's a big winner for me. I'm excited to get back into his tape and look and see what he's capable of. He definitely helped himself this weekend. In terms of a loser, I have some concerns about Dalvin Cook. I have some concerns about Charles Harris. Cook was my number 1 running back. Now he was neck and neck with Leonard Fournette and Joe Mixon especially. I dipped him below Joe Mixon, as Joe Mixon had a great pro day today. Now I'm talking literally, so my scale is based off of essentially a 6 to a 10. Anything over a 8.5, and this is across 15 different categories, and then I average them all together and I weight certain ones. Basically, the difference between a round is about 0.5 up to 8.5. 8.5 and above is a first round prospect. And so there's not much difference there. There's just things that add up that kind of knock a prospect score down. And so for me, I had Cook at a 9.0, which is an elite talent. To me, that's not a generational talent, but an elite NFL talent. That's someone that had the measurements, they had the tape, and they had the production. Well, we know that Cook had the production. We know he has the tape. He didn't have the measurables. And he failed miserably at the measurables. So my question to him is, well, I need to see your pro day now. Were you just out of shape? Maybe you just didn't take it seriously. Maybe you didn't train properly for it. Those are things I can understand. And I can forgive those. He's a super prospect. He's a wonderful player. He's still a great player. Even with that combine, to me, he went to an 8.88. So that's not much of a drop. That's still going to be a top 10 player on my board. But I did look at that, and I said, well, there's not, according to Jim Coburn, he's a really good follow on Twitter, does really good work with statistics and data, and really even just data mining. Since 1999, there's only been one running back drafted in the first 3 rounds that made a Pro Bowl or All-Pro with the measurables that he had. So, to me, that's a big red flag. Am I looking for an exception, or am I looking for a guy who fits the criteria? There's always going to be some exceptions, but generally speaking, I don't want to draft exceptions. So, Cook, I want to see his pro day. I thought he's a lot quicker. I thought he's a lot more shifty than what his pro day proved. And really that goes for Charles Harris as well, the edge from Missouri. He went from, now this is a position I weigh metrics heavily. We have proof to show that athleticism greatly matters at that position. It's not 100%, but it's about 90%. The best athletes are producing as edge rushers in the NFL. Harris tested very poorly. I saw on tape a good, bendy, very quick, strong athlete, an explosive athlete. Not the bendiest, not the most explosive. I didn't expect elite numbers from him at the combine, but he performed very poorly. To the point where I went back and watched his tape, and I could start seeing, well, maybe this is more of a snap jumper. Like Shane Ray, same school. More of a snap jumper. Someone that's not winning with that burst, he's actually winning with timing. And so, to me, again, I want to see his pro day. Prove it to me again that my eyes were deceiving me. If they were, then that's going to be someone that's going to be knocked down on my board. Instead of being a top 10 value, maybe a late first round value. So again, it's not going to kill his stock. We're talking less than a full round on my board. It's still someone I can see as a good starter in the NFL. I just don't necessarily see the all-pro talent anymore because the athleticism is not there. And if you don't think that the athleticism matters, go look at the athleticism of all-pro and Pro Bowl talent every year. It's high quality. There's not bad athletes making those teams for the most part. Maybe one or two on each team, but that's it. I'd rather not play the exception game. I want to make the best choices possible for my team as a theoretical GM. And as a theoretical GM, I want to make the informed decision, and the informed decision says play the numbers.
Great stuff as always, man. I think with that, we'll kind of wrap it up here. I think it was another good hour, a lot of good stuff there. Again, we'll come back and discuss more of the free agency, and then kind of start getting into more draft stuff. Any final thoughts on anything going on?
I don't think so, man. I mean, this is like I said, a great time of the year. Things are going to happen quickly. Things change quickly, and just sit back, relax, let it happen. I mean, there's only so much we can do as observers, but it's just fun to follow along, and I'm gonna try to do maybe some free agent previews or breakdowns once the draft guide's done. Do some video work if I can after free agency, and try to highlight how players fit into certain schemes. So we'll see, though. We'll see how much time I've got. I got to do some draft preview stuff for Bleacher Report as well. So busy times, man. It's a busy time of the year, and it's a good time of the year.
Yeah, absolutely, man. By the way, the Dolphins just tweeted about the re-signing of Kenny Stills.
Nice.
They literally
Very
just
nice.
posted it, so there you go. Yeah, again, Ian's draft guide coming out, so be on the lookout for that. And of course, busy week for me as well. Not necessarily football. Obviously, I'll be on the up and up with football, but of course, Selection Sunday coming up as well. So if you guys are into college basketball, I'll be tweeting out my thoughts during the week, and final bracket, of course, will come out Sunday afternoon. Will Illinois State get in? We'll see. That'll be the hot button debate here. So a lot of good stuff coming up between that, and of course NFL, free agency, and draft stuff coming up. So a lot of stuff to look forward to. So as always, we really appreciate you guys checking us out and enjoying our rambles, and just thank you so much. We really appreciate it. We enjoy getting on here and chatting and sharing our thoughts with you guys. So just keep up the support. We really enjoy it. So that being said, we're gonna get out of here. Take care. Enjoy the free agency wave, because it's gonna come fast and furious, and it's always a fun time. So for Ian Wharton, I am Bill Rossetti. We'll see you next time right here on GG. Take care, everybody.